Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another horrible case. The case of Whitney Heichel. On October 19, 2012, police discovered the body of 21-year-old Whitney Heichel. Her body was found about 40 minutes from her home in Gresham, Oregon, near a fire. Whitney had been missing since October 16. The last person to see her alive was her husband Clint Heichel, who saw her leave their apartment at 6:45 a.m. She kissed him goodbye and rushed to work for her 7 a.m. shift at a local Starbucks, but she never arrived for work. Clint became worried when he called Whitney's workplace to check on Whitney and see if she was okay. Her co-workers said that she hadn't come to work today, possibly because she was sick and decided to stay home. But Clint dismissed this idea. In the morning, Whitney felt fine and had come to work early in the morning. It was unusual for her not to be at work at this hour. She had never been late or missed a day before. And Clint also said that he couldn't reach her by phone. Sensing that something was wrong, he contacted the police around 10 a.m. that same morning. On the same day, police discovered that the Whitney's bank card had been used at a nearby gas station just hours after she went missing. Additionally, her black 1999 Ford Explorer was seen in the Walmart parking lot. What could have happened to her? Whitney was a hardworking, kind, and beautiful woman who was very religious and regularly attended her local church. She had strong relationships with her co-workers, family, friends, and neighbors. At the time she disappeared, she had been married to Clint for 9 months. They were a happy couple, and those close to them believed they had an ideal relationship. Whitney grew up with 6 siblings. Among her siblings, she was known for her determination and kindness. Clint appeared to be a very devoted husband. Friends and family found it hard to believe that someone so caring could harm Whitney. Many people in the community supported Clint, dismissing any accusations against him. The case sparked significant public interest. During a local media interview, Clint smiled while discussing his wife's disappearance, which raised suspicions among police. However, many interpreted this smile as a sign of nervousness. The police conducted a thorough investigation into Clint, but he had a solid alibi. He left the house shortly after his wife did. New information has surfaced indicating that Whitney's car was spotted near a Walmart on the outskirts of Gresham. Witnesses reported that a man was driving the car while Whitney was in the passenger seat. However, the witness could not provide a description of the driver or the condition of Whitney. Whitney's car was later found in the store's parking lot, with broken glass on the front passenger door. Signs of a struggle and blood were also discovered, and samples were sent to the lab for analysis. Unfortunately, the store's video surveillance cameras were positioned too far away to identify who was in the car. The only information obtained from the footage was that the car was left in the parking lot at 11 a.m. Efforts to locate additional witnesses who might have seen the car were unsuccessful. The police discovered information about a man in Whitney's car and started investigating who she might have been with. Whitney's family denied that she had a boyfriend. Her brothers were at work during that time, and none of her friends were with her in the car that morning. A search for Whitney was actively conducted in the area where she went missing, as well as in nearby forests and bodies of water. Unfortunately, her phone could not be tracked because it was likely turned off the day after her disappearance. On October 17, 2012, an important piece of evidence was found in the bushes near a service station, not far from the Walmart where her car was seen. A child discovered Whitney's mobile phone and gave it to some adults. When the police learned about this, they checked the phone and found it had been turned off the entire time, preventing them from tracking its location. The phone had dozens of missed calls and messages from her worried husband, along with calls from colleagues and other relatives. By this point, police were convinced that something terrible had happened to Whitney. Everyone who knew Whitney hoped she was safe, but police lost hope when they discovered blood in her car. Neighbors and church members joined in the search for her. Multiple search parties were quickly organized to comb the areas near Whitney's last known location. Meanwhile, police are reviewing the details of the incident and the information they have at the time. The recording did not provide any clues to identify the kidnapper, and there was no clear image of him on the surveillance camera. It appears that Whitney attempted to use her phone to call for help, but the attacker noticed and took the phone, possibly throwing it into the bushes where it was later found. Alternatively, he may have forced Whitney to throw it away in front of him, especially if he threatened her with a weapon. Additionally, the kidnapper did not contact anyone or demand ransom, suggesting that this was not a typical kidnapping for money. As time passed without Whitney being found, it is likely that she was murdered. The police started questioning residents of the apartment complex, including the Whitney's neighbors. Some residents were unaware that the Whitney was missing, while others expressed hope that she was safe and would return soon. Initially, nothing suspicious was discovered until the police spoke with one of the neighbors, Jonathan Holt. He had a close relationship with Clint and Whitney. In fact, Whitney's family gave Jonathan a key to their apartment so he could take care of their cats and plants while they were away. Just 2 weeks before Whitney went missing, Clint helped Jonathan start his motorcycle. Jonathan was involved in the search for Whitney after she went missing and offered support to her worried husband. As the police questioned Jonathan, he became increasingly nervous, leading to incoherent and confusing responses. The contradictions in his statements highlighted that he was inventing alibis on the spot. Initially, he claimed that he had been robbed that morning, but this turned out to be entirely false. When police inquired why he hadn't reported the robbery to the police, they found that his second alibi was also untrue. Police concluded that he had not been at work that day. Those who knew Jonathan, including Whitney's family, described him as a calm and friendly young man who had never caused any trouble. He was happily married, and police found no evidence of substance abuse or criminal behavior in his past. Jonathan was a good student, graduating from high school in 2006. 4 years later, he proposed to his girlfriend and she said yes. The couple initially lived in a nearby apartment complex before moving next door to Whitney's family just months before Whitney went missing. Jonathan recounted the events of that fateful morning. On the morning of October 16th, Whitney found Jonathan waiting for her outside her apartment. He had asked for a ride to work, and because they were close and trusted each other, she felt safe and agreed. Whitney was always willing to help others. They got into her car, and she started driving. About 5 minutes into the drive, Jonathan pulled out a 9mm pistol and pointed it at her, demanding that she take him to a secluded area near Lake Roslyn. Terrified, Whitney complied and stopped at the specified location. There, Jonathan attacked and raped her at gunpoint. The police later discovered the firearm nearby. After the attack, Jonathan feared that she would report him to the police, so he shot Whitney to avoid arrest. Jonathan threw away the gun, placed Whitney's body in the trunk of his car, and drove to a remote wooded area. He buried Whitney in the bushes and then drove to a Walmart parking lot. There, he parked his car in a secluded area, away from surveillance cameras. Subsequent investigation revealed that the blood found in the car was Whitney's. He then returned home, discarded his bloody clothes, and showered to remove any traces of gunpowder from his hands and the blood. According to police, the window had been intentionally broken to throw the investigation off track. The autopsy revealed that Jonathan had made no effort to conceal his evidence in the car. Several pieces of physical evidence were recovered, including DNA from both Whitney and Jonathan. Whitney was discovered on October 19th after the killer reported the crime and revealed the location. Her body showed signs of severe mutilation and gunshot wounds from close range. Additionally, there were indications of decomposition, which made the forensic investigation more challenging. The police had Jonathan's confession, Strong DNA evidence linking him and the victim found in Whitney's car, Jonathan's fingerprints on the gun that shot Whitney, and his DNA on her body after the attack. All of this confirmed Jonathan's testimony. Whitney's husband Clint was devastated after his wife's death. He found it hard to believe that Jonathan, a family friend and neighbor, could commit such a terrible act against his wife. The police gathered sufficient evidence to charge Jonathan Holt with first-degree murder. He had already been arrested and was cooperative throughout the investigation, providing the police with all the necessary information. It appeared that he genuinely regretted his actions and felt a deep sense of guilt. An autopsy of Whitney's body confirmed that she died from gunshot wounds, with the Jonathan shooting her 4 times in the head. Experts stated that she died instantly. In court, a recording of the Jonathan's testimony was presented along with all the evidence against him. The lawyer argued that the Jonathan showed remorse for his actions and had confessed to the crime, which should warrant a lighter sentence. Jonathan expressed his sorrow to his family and friends for the loss of they. He explained his behavior as being because he had a secret crush on Whitney. Even though he was married, every time he met Whitney, he felt intense emotions, but she remained cold and indifferent. He eventually lost control when she rejected him. During the trial, Jonathan spoke about his actions. In front of everyone present, Jonathan admitted to first-degree murder, kidnapping, and rape of Whitney. During the court proceedings, the Jonathan mostly kept his head down, appearing guilty. He began to cry when the relatives of the Whitney shared how his actions impacted their lives, but he cried the hardest when her husband Clint spoke. He tried to look at Clint 3 times, but each time he quickly looked down. On July 8, 2013, Jonathan Holt was found guilty on all charges and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The weekend following the trial, he was transferred to the Hammer County Detention Center in Noma County. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Blagg family. Jennifer Blagg was born on January 8, 1967, in Oklahoma, USA. She grew up with her mother and 1 brother, and they were very close from a young age. Jennifer was creative, sociable, and enjoyed playing the piano and dancing. However, she faced a traumatic experience in childhood when, at the age of 12, she was raped by a family friend who was much older than her. This incident deeply affected her, and it took a long time for her to heal. Despite this, she eventually overcame her feelings of resentment, pain, and anger, graduated from high school, and went on to attend college. Her future husband, Michael, was born into a military family. They frequently moved due to his father's career as a colonel in the U.S. Air Force. Growing up in such an environment was challenging, but Michael was a calm and obedient child. Michael was hardworking and intelligent. He even participated in a program sponsored by the governor to study nuclear physics, for which he received an honorary diploma. He continued to pursue his studies in science thereafter. Michael achieved everything by his own labor, because nothing in life came to him easily. He later shared that during this time, he worked as a pizza delivery driver to cover his college expenses. At 21, he married his first wife, but after about a year of constant issues in their relationship, they decided to get a divorce. In 2008, Jennifer enrolled at San Diego State University to pursue a business degree. Meanwhile, Michael chose to follow his father's path and joined the Navy, where he became a decorated Gulf War veteran and helicopter pilot. After returning from a business trip, he had some free time to explore the city. He attended a party with mutual friends, where he met Jennifer. They feel an attraction to each other, and Michael asked her out on a date, which she accepted. They went to the movies and afterward decided to start dating. In 1991, Michael and Jennifer got married and moved to the quiet town of Simpsonville in Southern California. They enjoyed the peaceful atmosphere and made many friends through their church. As a deeply religious couple, they seemed well prepared to start a family, even though Michael was often away serving in the Navy. 4 years later, they welcomed a daughter named Abby. After her birth, Michael left the military and secured a high-paying engineering job with a flexible schedule, allowing him to spend more time with his family. In his spare time, Michael began teaching Sunday school, which he considered important. However, due to Michael's job, they had to move several times, which was challenging for Jennifer. She often felt like just as she was settling into a new city and making new friends, her family had to move again. Despite her struggles, but when Michael proposed moving, Jennifer easily accepted because of her religious beliefs. Their final move occurred in 2001, when they decided to settle in Grand Junction, Colorado. It was a small, cozy town known as a winter resort, surrounded by mountains that attracted wealthy tourists. In Grand Junction, Michael took on an important role as an engineer for a company in that city. He also began teaching at the local Sunday school affiliated with the church. The family was very religious, and friends mentioned that they prayed about nearly every decision they made together. By 2001, Abby was 6 years old. She was getting ready for school and attended preparatory courses at a Christian school, where her mother, Jennifer, worked as a teacher's assistant. Abby was kind and helpful, assisting her parents with various household chores. She is also very religious, like her father and mother. On November 1, 2001, Michael called 911. The police were called and, upon arrival, they met Michael. According to Michael, he had just returned home from work and was immediately concerned when he saw the open door, because his family is always closed. As he entered the house, he didn't see anyone inside. In the bedroom, he discovered blood on bed, which dripped onto the floor. He also noticed that his wife's jewelry box was empty and that her handbag was on the floor, scattered with other belongings. Despite searching the entire house, he could not find his wife or daughter. Michael believed they were still alive and thought they might have been kidnapped, so he called for help. Based on the large amount of blood found, the police suspected that it was unlikely Jennifer and Abby were alive. They feared both may have been murdered. Since the Colorado River was nearby, the authorities considered the possibility that the bodies could have been disposed of in the river. They thoroughly searched the area, but found no signs of Jennifer and Abby. As the search operation expanded, volunteers and search teams joined forces to scour the surrounding region for any evidence related to Jennifer and Abby. Additionally, relatives of Jennifer traveled to the city to help with the search. While the search was ongoing, forensic experts examined the Blagg family home and collected various documents for analysis. They discovered significant amounts of blood on the bed and several fingerprints, which were sent to the lab for testing. Detectives also interviewed neighbors to piece together the timeline of incident from that day, but the neighbors did not see Jennifer and Abby. Michael was at work during the attack, a fact supported by CCTV footage and his colleagues' testimonies. He stated that he saw Jennifer and Abby alive early that morning, indicating that the attack likely occurred before he returned home from work. However, Michael was not excluded from the suspect list, as close family members are often scrutinized in such cases. However, it was crucial to verify the details carefully. The police interviewed Michael at the station, where he provided a thorough account of the incident from the previous day. He mentioned that around 7 p.m., Jennifer received a call from a friend who invited her to meet the following evening. After that, they watched TV and prepared for bed. By around 10 p.m., the entire family had gone to their rooms. Michael noted that early in the morning, when he woke up for work, Jennifer and Abby were still asleep. They were scheduled to get up around 6:30 to allow him to take Abby to her preparatory classes at school. After that, Jennifer returned home to take care of her daily tasks. Her husband Michael usually called her several times a day, but on that day, she didn't answer his calls. Assuming she might be busy, Michael didn't immediately worry. He then called her friend, assuming they decided to meet during the day, but the friend didn't know her whereabouts. Michael then continued with his day. He assumed she was at home, doing the laundry, cleaning, and cooking dinner. As soon as Michael returned home from work, he sensed that something was terribly wrong. There are two things that make him feel unusual. His daughter, Abby, didn't greet him as she usually did, and there was no smell of dinner cooking, which was unexpected since his wife Jennifer had planned to cook before meeting her friend. The scene became even more ominous when he spotted blood and immediately dialed the police. To preserve the crime scene, Michael went outside and waited for the police to arrive. The detectives then took over the investigation, and their inquiries led them to Abby's school. They discovered that she hadn't attended classes that day, which didn't surprise her teachers. Apparently, someone had called the class teacher the day before, claiming to be Abby's father and informing the school that she would be absent. The teacher wasn't suspicious at the time, but they did recall that a man, claiming to be Michael, had made the call. However, when questioned, Michael denied making the call, which only increased the suspicions about him. Further investigations revealed that Jennifer's friend from church, Melson, had noticed trouble in the Blagg family's relationship. Melson reported that Jennifer appeared to be extremely afraid of Michael. Jennifer only felt comfortable meeting in secret when Michael was not around. Jennifer had likely been forbidden by Michael from having visitors at their home. On one occasion, when Melson visited their house at length, Jennifer became anxious and hastily asked her to leave, probably to avoid Michael finding out that her had been to their house. The day before Jennifer's disappearance, Melson contacted Jennifer to invite her and Abby to visit. Notably, she specified that Michael, her husband, would not accompany them, which was unusual since the family typically traveled together. Melson agreed but thought the arrangement was peculiar. It was clear that Jennifer had recently argued with Michael and wanted space from him. Despite the plans, Jennifer never showed up the following morning. Later, investigators discovered voice messages from Michael to Jennifer, in which he sent her well wishes and affectionate greetings. However, authorities suspect that these messages may have been part of a setup, as it's possible that both Jennifer and Abby were already dead when the messages were sent. This thing raised suspicion about Michael's involvement, but he insisted on his innocence. He even gave interviews to journalists, expressing frustration that the police were focusing on him, and even they overlooking other suspects. Michael said he was deeply concerned about his wife and daughter's whereabouts and felt the real perpetrator was still at large. He has offered a $3,000 reward for any information that could help speed up the investigation. The detectives remained suspicious of Michael's behavior, so they decided to monitor him closely. During their investigation, they discovered blood on the bed, but strangely, very little was found on the surrounding walls. Normally, blood splatters and scatters in various directions, but in this case, that wasn't the case. DNA analysis revealed that the blood on the bed belonged to Jennifer. Additionally, when the detectives applied luminol to the family van, they found several hidden blood stains on the door and inside the vehicle, suggesting that it had been used to transport the victims, Abby and Jennifer. Michael reported to work on the day his wife and daughter disappeared. An investigation of the house revealed 55 fingerprints, many of which belonged to Michael. Notably, 17 fingerprints were unidentified, and 6 of those were small to potentially belong to young daughter, Abby. Despite this, Michael claimed that he had seen nothing unusual and pointed out that it was normal for family members' fingerprints to be present in the home. As the investigation continued, Michael relocated to a different house and didn't return to the original one, even after restrictions were lifted. He chose not to clean and no return to the house, stating that it was too painful for him. However, this decision ultimately worked in the police's favor as they were able to periodically examine the crime scene. In interviews with journalists, Michael portrayed the disappearance as resembling a robbery, citing the missing jewelry and money from the house. He also mentioned that there had been a string of burglaries in the area over the past year, suggesting that his family had simply been in the wrong place at the wrong time. According to Michael, the thieves may have broken in while his family was asleep, inadvertently targeting them. He suspected that the robbers were provoked by something when they entered his house. Even so, he held on to the hope that his wife and daughter were still alive. He often referenced Bible verses when communicating with the media, maintaining his innocence when questioned by the media and the police. However, detectives were convinced that the incident was not a robbery, as they found no signs of forced entry. They believed that the stolen items in the house were just a setup to distract the investigation. The police noted that robbers typically target empty homes to avoid confrontations and complications. If they encountered occupants, they wouldn't waste time and energy brutally killing them. Instead, they would opt for a quicker method. In the Blagg family home, a diary belonging to Jennifer was discovered. In it, she wrote about having a severe argument with Michael the day before her disappearance and fearing that he might harm her. Although she didn't elaborate on the details, she framed the situation in biblical terms. The detectives were unclear about the argument and approached Michael for clarification, but he maintained he had no memory of it. However, the police discovered a note addressed to him, apologizing for allowing negativity to creep back into their lives, suggesting relationship problems. When examining the Blagg family computer, the police were surprised to find thousands of hardcore pornography images. However, Michael denied any involvement in the images, he claiming that his wife was trying to spice up their lives. A further investigation showed that Michael and Jennifer's relationship had been troubled for a while. Michael had initially hired an escort out of curiosity, but over time he became hooked on the services. When investigators visited Michael's new house to question him, but no one opened the door, despite his car being parked outside. After hearing the sound of running water, they broke down the door and found Michael in the bathtub with cuts on his wrists that he had done to himself. In his hand, he was holding a photo of Abby and Jennifer, a Bible, and a note claiming he was not involved in their murders. Michael was rushed to the hospital, where he received medical treatment and survived. During the investigation, the sheriff's department received an anonymous tip about Michael's van being spotted near Ridge Park on the day Abby and Jennifer disappeared. This location was only a minute from them home. As a result, the police resumed their search, focusing on a 60 kilometers radius around them home. The new search lasted for 11 days, but failed to yield any results in the specified area. Subsequently, the police obtained new information. Michael was suspected of stealing an industrial item worth about $500 from his workplace shortly before Abby and Jennifer disappeared. Detectives called Michael in for questioning, suspecting he might be involved in the workplace incident. Michael broke down in tears, fearing he would be falsely accused of his family's murder, but he did not confess to the crime. Later, he explained that his emotional reaction was triggered by the fear of being wrongly accused of killing his family. A colleague of Michael contacted the police and provided crucial information. On the day Jennifer disappeared, Michael took out the trash at work, which was unusual since it was not part of his job. According to the colleague, they normally took turns doing this task. However, on that particular day, Michael insisted on doing it himself. He reacted aggressively when his colleague offered to help. It now seemed clear that Michael was trying to dispose of evidence. On June 5, 2002, the police discovered a woman's body that matched Jennifer's description. The body was wrapped in some type of cover and had holes in it, with a bullet still lodged in her head. It appeared that the killer had discarded her body in a landfill. Forensic experts confirmed through dental records that the murdered woman was indeed Jennifer. They determined that she died from a close-range gunshot wound to the head. Additionally, they also was established that she was killed while sleeping, as a retainer was found in her mouth, which she only wore at night. Unfortunately, The body had lain in the open for 7 months, and as a result, the remains were severely decomposed, providing limited information for the investigators. Investigators found that there were several garbage sites assigned to different companies. After digging at the location where the Jennifer's body was found, they confirmed that this particular area was managed by the company where Michael worked. The police, considering this coincidence to be more than accidental, they intensified their search for Abby's body at the dump but were unsuccessful. Further investigation revealed that Michael had left the city without warning, relocating to a different state. Although Abby's body was not found at the dump, the evidence was sufficient to charge Michael with the murder of Abby and Jennifer. The relatives of Jennifer were deeply upset by the manner in which her body was treated, and they strongly suspected Michael of disposing of Abby's bodies in a similar way. The detectives were unable to find anyone who knew the suspect Michael well enough to approach. However, they then discovered that his mother was still alive. Since she lived in Georgia, a state he often visited, the detectives decided to pay her a visit. Upon arriving at her house, they were met by a man. He was identified as Michael, who was subsequently arrested and transported back to Colorado to face charges of double first-degree murder. Following Michael's capture, the search teams decided to re-examine the landfill area. They regrouped and brought in volunteers to aid in the search. Over the course of 7 weeks, they searched through 7,000 tons of trash, but unfortunately, they never found Abby's body. The prosecutor's office suspected that Michael was living a double life. On the surface, the family appeared perfect, but in reality, Michael was manipulative and cruel. However, his first wife did not support these claims, stating that she had never experienced insults or physical abuse from him. In contrast, several witnesses reported that Michael's relationship with Jennifer was troubled from the start, with frequent arguments even before they got married. Michael and Jennifer's issues stemmed from Michael's love for partying and spending time with friends, while Jennifer wanted to build a strong family and asked him to stop going out. Eventually, Jennifer issued an ultimatum, and Michael chose to commit to her. They got married, and soon after, they had a child. During this time, Michael was still serving in the Navy, which often left Jennifer alone to cope with postpartum depression and care for their newborn daughter. Although she faced many difficulties, but Jennifer never complained. However, the relationship began to deteriorate due to domestic issues. After that, Michael found a job as an engineer, and things seemed to improve. He also started teaching at a Sunday school. However, his fellow teachers disagreed with his teaching methods and views on discussing topics like sex and abortion with teenagers. His liberal approach clashed with the conservative values of the Sunday school, leading to him having to quit his job there. Following this, the Blagg family traveled a bit more before settling in a new location to start fresh. This move resulted in big debt because their house in South Carolina took a long time to sell. Jennifer was initially unhappy in their new home and frequently called her friends, wishing to return. However, since Michael was earning a good income and managing to pay off their debts, she chose to stay with him during this challenging time. Before the violent incident occurred, there seemed to be a serious issue in the marriage. A local law firm employee reported that a few days before Jennifer's disappearance, she sought marriage and family counseling. Unfortunately, she was turned away because the lawyer was on vacation. Jennifer revealed that she had been a victim of Michael's violence and wanted to initiate a divorce. The firm intended to assist her as soon as they returned, but she vanished before they could meet again. Although police searched her house, car, and garage, they found no traces of her blood. However, it was suspected that Abby was likely murdered because she may have witnessed her mother's, Jennifer, murder. It was believed that she was probably strangled, which could explain why there were no blood traces found. The prosecutor's office decided to pause proceedings to gather information about the child Abby. Without a body, proving the murder would be extremely challenging. Michael was released on bail and allowed to stay with his mother within the city while awaiting the hearing. Michael claimed he could not have killed his family, stating he had no motive. He insisted that family relations were good and mentioned he had been preparing for Christmas by buying gifts worth over $5,000 for his loved ones. However, no one found his claims credible. The hearings were scheduled for March 2004. It was believed that Jennifer wanted to end her relationship with her husband, Michael, who did not agree and became angry. The prosecutor's office suspected that he killed both his wife and possibly their daughter during the night, then hid their bodies and went to work in the morning, trying to dispose of them with the trash. After his work shift, Michael returned home and called the police. Jennifer's mother testified for the prosecution. At first, she supported Michael, but her opinion changed when she saw the evidence. She claimed that Michael had been abusive to Jennifer for a long time, particularly when he was drinking. During those times, he would often attack and choke Jennifer, sometimes leaving her unconscious. After 12 hours of deliberation, the jury found Michael guilty of murdering Jennifer and sentenced him to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole on April 16, 2004. Although the trial concluded, but Michael's story did not end there. 10 years later, Michael had a chance to retry his case. Throughout the years, his lawyers searched for any possible ways to appeal. One major issue was that one of the jurors was blind, making it difficult for him to fully assess the evidence presented. Additionally, a female juror had intentionally provided false information on her questionnaire. She later confessed, explaining that her bias against Michael stemmed from her own experiences as a long-term victim of domestic violence. This affected her ability to objectively consider the details of the case, resulting in her vote against him. As a result, the verdict was overturned, and preparations for a new trial began. The lying juror was found guilty of contempt of court and received the 10-day prison sentence along with a $10,000 fine. In a surprising turn, the defense introduced a new suspect, a man named Philip Ruins, from Montana. He was linked to a series of brutal rapes, and both Jennifer and Abby were among his many victims. In November 2001, it was reported that he was in Colorado around the same time Abby and Jennifer went missing. Philip had a history of brutal crimes but had never faced punishment until now. In 201st, a new trial was held for him. This time, the prosecution called in an expert to analyze the crime scene. The expert suggested that the arrangement of objects in the house indicated a staged crime rather than a genuine robbery. He noted that the crime was executed clumsily and unprofessionally. According to his assessment, Jennifer was shot while she was asleep in her bed. The assailant then held her down until her heart stopped, after which he removed her body from the house and placed it in a van. Unfortunately, the expert could not provide any useful information about Abby due to a lack of evidence. Michael's family said he was heartbroken after his wife and daughter went missing. They all embraced and cried together, creating a deeply emotional scene. They found it hard to believe that he could be involved in his wife's murder. During the interrogation and trial, Michael remained quiet and composed, showing little emotion. The prosecutor interpreted his calm demeanor as a sign of guilt. However, Michael's lawyer argued that such behavior was typical for a conservative husband. Despite the lawyer's efforts, Michael was once again found guilty of murdering his wife and was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Meanwhile, investigators were also looking into Philip. He was a convicted sexual predator serving 200 years for creating and distributing child pornography and for sexually abusing minors. Philip lured his young victims through his online forum. When police searched Philip's home, they discovered a list of victims' names that included Jennifer and Abby, with the date of the kidnapping coincides with the time of their disappearance. However, there is no physical evidence linking Philip to this crime, no fingerprints or DNA were found at the scene, and his handwriting did not match any evidence. Additionally, it is unclear how Jennifer's body ended up in the landfill, where trash from her husband's workplace was dumped. As a result, investigators did not believe Philip was involved in the murder of Jennifer or the disappearance of Abby. However, the trial against Philip Ruins for various charges was difficult. Many of his victims experienced significant mental health problems due to the violence they endured. Some faced substance addiction, while others suffered from persistent nightmares. Unfortunately, there has been little advancement in the investigation into Abby's disappearance, as Philip has not admitted to the murders of either Jennifer or Abby. Abby's body has still not been located, and her fate remains unknown. She could possibly still be alive. A portrait of Abby has been created, and debates are ongoing about whether Michael is truly guilty of his wife's murder or if he was wrongfully convicted. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Lynn Hernan. In Wisconsin, USA, there is a small town with a population of around 15,000, located near Milwaukee. On October 3, 2018, the tranquility of this town was shattered when Jesse Kerchevsky, the caregiver for Lynn Hernan, called 911. Jesse reported finding 62-year-old Lynn. There was no sign of life in her apartment, sitting in a reclined position amid a mess of scattered medications. Jesse informed the dispatcher that Lynn had been experiencing severe stomach pains for several months, which had been worsening over time. This pain may have led Lynn to take a lethal dose of medications. When emergency services arrived, the doctors confirmed Lynn Hernan's death, which was presumed to be due to poisoning. It was essential to perform all necessary tests, including toxicology, to determine the cause of Lynn's death. They took her to the forensic experts table, where blood was drawn, tissue samples were examined. And an unusual finding was a very high level of tetrazolline A. While this substance is found in certain drugs, none of the tablets located around the body contained it. As it turns out, tetrazolline A is found in some eye drops sold without a prescription, which are used to relieve eye redness and inflammation. This is particularly useful for allergic reactions and mild eye fatigue, and a few drops are typically sufficient. While these eye drops are safe when applied to the eyes, they can be harmful and even dangerous if ingested, especially in large amounts. Ingesting a significant quantity can lead to serious consequences, including vomiting, internal bleeding, memory loss, and even death at high doses. This aligns with the nurse's description of the prolonged suffering from stomach pain experienced by Lynn. The medical examiner's court was alarmed by the unusual circumstances surrounding Lynn's death, as there are much less painful and quicker ways to die. At 62, she likely did not want to endure suffering for months before dying. It appeared that her pain was due to a gradual increase in tetrazolline A levels in her blood. Based on this, the expert suggested that she might have been murdered. After reviewing the autopsy report, detectives concurred and initiated a criminal investigation. Lynn Hernan had no children and had outlived all her relatives. The first person police contacted to gather details about her death, even before the toxicology report was complete, was her nurse, 39-year-old Jesse Kerchevsky. Jesse had been caring for Lynn, who lived alone, for several years, and their relationship was described as friendly. Lynn saw Jesse not just as a nurse, but as a true confidant. About 5 years prior to the incident, Lynn struggled with both physical and mental health issues, including depression and chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. So she needed to be supervised, however, but no one in her family could help her. She dealt with several illnesses, but the most agonizing was her stomach pain. In the final months of her life, she could only consume soup due to intestinal problems. Jesse carefully overseen her diet and medication. Following the incident, Jesse was promptly called to the police station for questioning. Forensic experts were analyzing the body and gathering materials for a toxicology test. Initially, it seemed that police was simply obtaining information from Jessie. However, it quickly became clear that the situation was more complicated than it appeared. During the inquiry, both Jessie and her mother, Jennifer Flower, were present. Jessie's mother was worried because she believed her daughter might be in danger. She felt the detectives were overly focused on Jessie and might be trying to accuse her of murder. Ironically, her concerns only increased suspicion towards Jessie instead of alleviating it. The police tried to clarify with Jessie the cause that led to Lynn's tragic end. They questioned Jessie about why Lynn chose to end her life in such a dramatic manner. At this time, no one doubted Jessie's account. She genuinely believed Lynn had died by taking a lethal dose of drugs voluntarily. However, Jessie's behavior has made the police suspicious. Detectives were trying to determine if there were any underlying factors related to Lynn's death, such as a depressive state. They wondered if she had previously attempted to end her life and what could have caused the severe stomach pains she experienced. However, Jessie was unable to provide any answers. It appeared that she was not only grieving the loss of her employer but also withholding important information. Ultimately, Jessie was released due to a lack of evidence. The investigators were awaiting the official conclusions from a forensic expert following a toxicological examination. After the police became suspicious of Nurse Jennifer, they began to keep an eye on her mother, Jennifer. They interviewed Jennifer and learned that she had been a close friend of Lynn. She had helped her daughter, Jessie, secure a job with Lynn's home. Together, they provided care for Lynn, assisted Lynn in Lynn with age-related issues, care, and providing everything else needed. However, Jennifer also raised suspicions among the police. At this time, the toxicology results appear to be particularly worrying. Given Lynn's age and health issues, it was unlikely that she had been ingesting eye drops orally for an extended period. Investigators needed to figure out how such a large quantity of the drug ended up in her system. Experts indicated that a lethal dose of the substance would require at least 4 bottles, while the results suggested Lynn had consumed at least 6 bottles, which should have led to severe stomach cramps and pain before her death. Shortly after Lynn's death, an unusual situation arose. Jessie and Jennifer purchased a new, large, and expensive television, even though their income was modest. Additionally, the police found the car that Lynn had given to her nurse, Jessie, to be suspicious. Investigators noted the peculiar behavior of Jessie and Jennifer, which increasingly suggested that Lynn's death was not voluntary. Typically, criminals attempt to cover up their actions and hide evidence to evade justice, but this situation appeared to be different. Besides, Jessie and Jennifer showed no signs of grief. Instead, they seemed to revel in the inheritance, which deepened the suspicions against them. The police began to suspect that Jessie might have orchestrated the murder. Jennifer did not have regular access to Lynn's apartment, but Jessie visited Lynn almost daily, allowing her easy access to Lynn's food and medicine. Jessie insisted that she truly loved Lynn and wanted to help Lynn. The two had become like family. However, the detectives suspected that Lynn had made a serious mistake by allowing someone who could potentially harm her into her life. The suspects, Jessie and Jennifer, stayed attentive to the investigation, frequently calling the police station to check on the case's progress. The detectives realized that Jessie and Jennifer weren't genuinely concerned about what had happened. Rather, they were worried about being found out. Their behavior indicated they were closely monitoring the investigation. More evidence of Jessie and Jennifer's involvement and a thorough investigation were necessary to ensure justice. Jessie and her mother noticed that the police had taken a greater interest in their activities. During each visit to the station, Jessie felt compelled to defend herself. She said had a close relationship with Lynn and they treated each other like family. Jessie argued that any suspicions against her were baseless, insisting it was just a coincidence that she was a nurse and always in close contact with Lynn. Being a nurse did not make her a killer, but the detectives relied on more than just assumptions. Initially, Jesse did not mention on the increased levels of tetrazzolina found in Lynn's blood. However, when she was cornered, she revealed that Lynn frequently used these eye drops and might have applied them without realizing it. Jesse attributed this to Lynn's cognitive issues, which sometimes caused her to lose control over her actions. However, the police quickly identified a key witness named Andrew Pooh. Although he was not related to Lynn, he described their relationship as close and friendly. Lynn had lived with Andrew's family, and he saw Lynn as his grandmother, she even helping him financially during his college years. Since she had no children, Lynn wanted to leave Andrew an inheritance, but he declined to avoid any suspicion of wanting money. Despite his refusal, Lynn insisted on naming him as her heir since she had no other beneficiaries. However, they never had the chance to finalize this arrangement. According to Andrew, Lynn had proposed leaving him an inheritance between $10,000 and $50,000. He frequently visited Lynn and knew Jesse, her nurse. Andrew suspects that Lynn's death may have been related to Jesse's fear of losing her inheritance, especially since she knew that Lynn intended to leave her fortune to Andrew. After Lynn passed away, Jesse unexpectedly inherited all of Lynn's property, which raised suspicions. Andrew approached Jesse hoping to receive part of the inheritance, but she claimed that Lynn had many debts and hadn't paid her bills for a long time. As a result, Jesse said most of the inheritance would go towards settling those debts. This led Andrew decided to consult lawyers to verify this information. After that, Jesse got in touch and arranged to meet with Andrew. She gave him documents that she proved Lynn's debt had been repaid. After settling all debts, Jesse said she had only $26,000 left and offered to share it with Andrew. However, when the police investigated, they discovered that these documents were fake, created using a computer program. It turned out Jesse hadn't paid anyone. This discovery led investigators to take a closer look at Lynn's financial situation. They quickly learned that during her time as a nurse, Jesse had conducted suspicious transactions involving Lynn's finances. She applied for a loan to the bank, the application was approved, and as a result the loan was disbursed. Even though the loans were in Lynn's name, Jesse was the one who actually used the funds. Ultimately, it was revealed that over the years, she had taken out about $300 in loans, of which only $88 was left by the time of the police investigation. In response to the financial claims made by the police officers, Jesse maintained that she acted at Lynn's request. She stated that Lynn provided the necessary documents for the loans and frequently asked her to purchase eye drops. Jesse mentioned that she had 4 bottles on hand, which Lynn had given her, and noted that she saw Lynn using the product correctly. She insisted that she did not supervise this process. However, police were skeptical of her account. At the crime scene, there were no eye drop bottles found near the body. Instead, pills were littered around, and no traces of those pills were found in Lynn's body. Lynn was said to have kept her bottle of eye drops on her nightstand, but a thorough search of the apartment revealed they were missing. The situation became increasingly complicated, suggesting that someone had staged the scene. It appeared that it had been discarded to hide evidence. The forensic expert believed that Lynn had been ingesting the eye drops for an extended period, leading to poisoning, severe pain, and ultimately death. It seemed unlikely that Lynn could have used such a large quantity on her own. This indicates that someone has poisoned her. Jesse, who spent the most time with Lynn and managed her diet and medications, emerged as the primary suspect. Suspicious thing, the detectives did not contact Jesse or summon her for questioning. Instead, she frequently visited the police station to ask about the investigation's progress. Jesse maintained that she had no motive to harm Lynn and denied any involvement in financial fraud. However, the circumstances surrounding the drugs continued to trouble the investigators, who began to apply pressure on Jesse. She shared bizarre stories about how Lynn supposedly enjoyed mixing vodka with eye drops, claiming this gave Lynn extra enjoyment from the drink. Jessie insisted she was unaware that regular eye drops could be dangerous and viewed it as just one of Lynn's eccentric habits. Jessie stated that on that fateful morning, she brought 4 additional bottles of eye drops to the Lynn's apartment and claimed that Lynn even mixed them into her water. This situation continued for about 6 months until a tragic conclusion, making the story increasingly bizarre. Despite the circumstantial evidence gathered by investigators, detectives believed Jessie was fabricating excuses. Ultimately, they decided to arrest Jessie on suspicion of premeditated murder. Evidence from the crime scene, including Jessie's cell phone, was sent for analysis, which provided the police with more information. They discovered that Jessie was in regular contact with her boyfriend, Scott Craig. The conversations between Jessie and Scott particularly caught the attention of police. It became evident that Jessie's assertion of being unaware of the dangers of ingesting eye drops was untrue. She had been researching this information online for some time. By the time she started caring for Lynn, she was already knowledgeable about products containing the harmful substance, suggesting she had intentionally chosen medications that contained it in high amounts. Jessie first considered using eye drops as a way to poison Lynn because they could be easily purchased without a prescription. All she needed to do was persuade Lynn to take them orally or secretly mix them into Lynn's food or drink. Due to Lynn's cognitive difficulty, so this seemed simple. From Jessie and Scott's conversations, it seemed he was unaware that Jessie was attempting to poison Lynn. However, a few months before the incident, a conversation revealed that Jessie had mentioned Lynn's serious illness, including episodes of vomiting blood, which led to Lynn being hospitalized. Doctors later reported that she had been poisoned. The investigation showed that Jessie must have known the consequences of her actions. The police looked into Scott's potential involvement and brought him in for questioning. He denied any knowledge of the poisoning plan but claimed that Jessie had informed him about Lynn's previous poisonings. Scott viewed Jessie as a pathological liar, and their relationship was close to ending. He thought Jessie fabricated the poisoning story to gain his sympathy and reconcile with him. During another conversation in September, Jessie claimed Lynn was hospitalized and on medication, stating that Lynn is in intensive care and is on life support machines. In reality, Lynn had already passed away. Scott was fed up with the relationship and wanted to end it that day. However, Jessie attempted to manipulate him again by claiming that Lynn was in the hospital, hoping to elicit his sympathy. She was trying to hold on to their relationship. The situation was complicated. Was it a fatal overdose, or a carefully planned scheme to obtain an inheritance? It turns out there was a clear motive in Jessie's actions. Over time, motivation will reveal itself. It is possible that Lynn found out about this, leading to her murder. Jessie then took possession of Lynn's property and money. Additionally, Jessie was desperate to keep her relationship with Scott, who had mentioned breaking up multiple times. Jessie concealed the true state of Lynn's, creating a web of lies that made it hard to uncover the truth. Investigators found that Jessie refused to admit her guilt. She maintained that Lynn consumed 100 liters of vodka daily and added eye drops to it. In October 2023, the investigation revealed the full extent of Jessie's financial fraud. It was found that since 2016, Lynn's credit limit had increased from almost zero to $72,000. This was just the beginning. After her death, nearly $16,000 was stolen from her apartment, which was allegedly used to pay off some debts. Jessie claimed she only repaid loans that were in Lynn's name, but the source of these funds was traced. The total debts amounted to hundreds of thousands of dollars, taken out from banks under Lynn's name. Additionally, items worth $155 were stolen from Lynn's home. Initially, these items were reported missing, but it was later discovered that Jessie started receiving money in her accounts shortly thereafter, likely from the sale of Lynn's possessions. Lynn was a wealthy single woman who rarely used credit cards or loans. Additionally, the sudden rapid increase in debt that shortly after she hiring a new nurse, Jessie, seemed suspicious. Reports indicated that Jessie visited the casino every month, gambling large amounts with her boyfriend Scott, who didn't question where the money was coming from. They often went to gambling establishments at least twice a month. The investigation revealed that Jessie had a prior criminal record. Despite being young, she had a significant history of offenses, including document forgery, fraud, and gambling. Since 2010, Jessie struggled with a severe gambling addiction. In February of that year, she defrauded two individuals out of $4,000 by taking out loans in their names. Although she didn't use fake documents, it was shown that she obtained these funds through deceitful methods. By April 2010, she had lost over $45,000. During this time, she borrowed an additional $2,500 and applied for a loan exceeding $6,000, falsely claiming that her mother, Jennifer, had approved it by using her mother's documents. This was, of course, a lie. Jessie managed to secure over $6,500 in credit, using her mother's car as collateral, but she never repaid this amount. As a result, her mother nearly lost her car and had to gather a large amount of documentation to prove that she was not responsible for those loans. Jessie was imprisoned for 2 years but was released early due to good behavior. Her mother stated that she struggled with a severe gambling addiction. The prosecutor's office claimed that 25-year-old Jessie committed premeditated murder to gain financial benefits from her victim, Lynn. By doing so, she attempted to eliminate her own debts. It is alleged that she killed Lynn, who had endured pain and progressive for years, without considering the consequences. Jessie described the act as one of mercy, said that she could no longer bear to see Lynn suffer. The lawyers argued that Jessie did not kill Lynn. They explained that Lynn had cognitive impairments and did not understand the risks of type of eye drops she was taking. They stated that Lynn believed that drinking vodka mixed with eye drops would help her sleep better, leading her to use the drops without realizing the danger. According to the prosecution, on the day of the murder, Jessie provided Lynn with water that contained the contents of 6 eye drop bottles. However, the lethal dose was only 1 bottle. In court, both Jessie and Jennifer testified that Lynn consumed the water with the 6 bottles of drops. Initially, Jessie, who was a nurse, advised Lynn against using the drops, but after a lengthy argument, Jessie eventually relented, unaware of the severe outcomes that could result. Afterward, Jessie left for a few hours on business, not knowing how much of the substance Lynn had actually consumed or how it would affect her. Especially since Lynn had previously been hospitalized for poisoning from the drops. Lynn was aware of the dangers associated with eye drops, which made the idea of her accidental poisoning implausible. Jessie also knew about the harmful effects of these substances, and a key point against her was that no bottles of the eye drops were found near Lynn's body. It was evident that someone assisted Lynn in taking the medicine. The trial was intense and emotional, with the judge actively engaging in discussions. On November 14, 2023, the jury convicted Jessie of first-degree murder, theft, and concealment of evidence. Upon hearing the verdict, Jessie broke down in tears. She was sentenced to life in prison but could be eligible for parole after 40 years. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Brian King and Christina Benjamin. On July 29, 1993, it was a hot day in Alice County, Texas, USA. Despite the heat, a road crew was working on Cato Road to prepare the ground for asphalt. During their break, one worker leveling gravel spotted something unusual in the thick bushes across the Smith Creek River. The object, about 100 meters away, had a grayish color that made it stand out from the surrounding greenery. Curiosity prompted the worker and a colleague to climb over a barbed wire fence to investigate the mysterious object. As they got closer, about 10 meters from the object, a foul stench hit their noses. The stench became unbearable, and they covered their noses with their clothes. As they got closer, they discovered that the object was a corpse. It appeared to be a she, probably of school age. The gruesome sight showed torn flesh covered in flies, but the most shocking aspect was that the girl's head and arms were missing. The workers quickly notified their supervisor and decided to call the police. Without cell phones and far from the nearest town, they decided to leave one worker with the body while the other went to a small neighboring town to seek help. The police arrived shortly after being notified and began examining the scene for evidence and any dismembered body parts. However, a more gruesome discovery awaited them just 300 meters away. They discovered the body of a young girl and also found the body of a young man, who appeared to be about 15 years old. He was lying face down on the riverbank, about 10 meters from the bridge. Unlike the girl, he was still dressed and had not been dismembered. It appeared that he had been thrown into the river, and the current had washed him to shore. Retrieving the young man's body was much more difficult than accessing the girl's remains, so the police called the city fire department for assistance. With the help of special equipment, they were able to reach his body. Meanwhile, a team of forensic experts remained at the scene to investigate and collect evidence before it got too dark. Police worked the scene until the sun went down. They focused on the area where the bodies were found, and the medical examiner analyzed the victims. The expert determined that the first body, the girl, was that of a teenage girl who had been stabbed multiple times. She had been shot twice in the back with a .22 caliber gun, and her head had been severed from her body. It was likely with a large hunting knife or possibly an axe. The body showed numerous severe wounds on the abdomen, thighs, and genitals, with some resembling intricate hieroglyphs carved into the skin. There was a long, deep cut on the stomach, similar to those made during an autopsy. The criminal expert noted signs of extreme cruelty inside the cavity, including torn intestines and severed hands. Bruises that looked like marks from handcuffs suggested the victims had been restrained for a period before the torture started. Additionally, both of the girls' breasts had been removed. Experts believe the victims' bodies had been dead for 2 days, judging by their level of decomposition. He had been shot twice in the head with a similar weapon. There were no signs of a beating or struggle on his body. Police believe the attacker may have severed the girl's arms and head to make identification more difficult. However, he may not have realized that advanced DNA identification methods were available. However, the condition of the bodies and their decomposition could make this identification quite difficult. Forensic scientists found that the girl had been sexually assaulted. The high temperatures had caused significant decomposition, making it difficult to determine the exact details of the crime. Police believe the attack was carried out in anger or extreme hatred. However, the presence of fly larvae allowed researchers to determine a more precise time of death for both teens. The victims were tortured on the night of July 26th to 27th. To support their findings, the forensic expert consulted a forensic entomologist who studies the growth of insects on decomposing bodies and the damage they cause. Ultimately, the lab staff agreed that the time of death had been accurately determined. However, some errors regarding the timeline of the investigation had to be cleared up. Since the boy's hands and head were intact, forensic experts were puzzled as to how he escaped the same fate as the girl. They questioned why his hands were not cut off, as this would have made it easier for the criminal to conceal the victim's identity. The killer likely thought that the boy's body would be lost in the current or would drown, making it difficult to find. This might explain why he didn't dismember the body, Or perhaps the body fell into the water by accident. The police believed that the dismemberment was not meant to mislead the investigation but might have been motivated by something more disturbing. Many serial killers keep trophies from their crimes. It's possible that the girl's head became part of such a gruesome collection because the attack resembled that of a maniac. The police's first goal was to find the girl's clothes. During their search, they found a clump of light-colored hair caught in the barbed wire that the workers had crossed. Police believed that this hair might have come from the decapitated victim. Unfortunately, the mutilated body had no identifying marks. However, in the boy's pocket, they found a book subscription card from a town registered to Brian King. They were able to confirm the details at the library, but it was closed for the night, so they would have to wait until morning. The next morning, the police station received a report about the disappearance of 2 teenagers from a small town, the same one where the library was located. The boy's name was Brian King, and the girl's name was Christina Benjamin. After receiving the report, police visited the boy's home and showed the wallet they had found to the father who answered the door. He confirmed that it belonged to his 14-year-old son, Brian, who was missing along with his 13-year-old stepdaughter, Christina, who had blonde hair. Days before the incident, around midnight, the children's father was awakened by a suspicious car that honked its horn and drove off. During this time, Brian was sleeping in a tent outside the house, which was unusual for a teenager. The car returned just 10 to 15 minutes later. The father noticed his son talking calmly with the driver and assumed it was one of Brian's friends. He spotted a man with blonde hair in the back seat but couldn't see the driver. Feeling reassured, he went to the bathroom. When he came back, the car and his son were gone. The father thought Brian had gone out with friends and planned to discuss this odd situation with him in the morning, so he went to bed. However, Brian never returned home, and it was later discovered that Christina had also disappeared. The parents started contacting friends and acquaintances of their children, but no one had seen the teenagers. The family had a younger girl who shared a room with Christina. She reported that on the night they disappeared, Brian entered their room and woke up Christina. He mentioned that some cool guys had arrived in a car and invited them to a party. Christina agreed, and they both left home together. Eventually, their parents reported the children missing to the police. They noted that before their disappearance, Christina had injured her foot during a school class. Upon further investigation, it was found that Christina's hair was on the forensic expert's desk. She had light hair, which was compared to strands found on a fence and those collected from home combs. The results showed that the hairs did not match, indicating they could belong to a likely killer, who also appeared to have light hair. With no evidence available, forensic experts had to rely on alternative methods. They discovered fibers on Brian's shoes that matched the material used in the carpets of Japanese cars. Brian's father provided a description of the car he saw, mentioning that it was dark in color. However, his description lacked detail, as he could not recall the specific model or license plate number. Police were particularly puzzled by the brutality that Christina had suffered. If this was not a personal hate crime, it would suggest they were dealing with a very dangerous person who was likely to commit further acts of violence. They speculate that the motive behind such cruelty could have been sexual. After interviewing the friends of the murdered teenagers, the police learned that on the evening of her disappearance, Christina was supposed to meet a man named Jason. All the witnesses who spoke to the police pointed to Jason Massey as the only person capable of committing such a crime. One of his friends revealed that Jason had long ago turned to a darker lifestyle. He had dropped out of school, never held a job, frequently killed animals, and kept their heads as trophies. Jason did not hide his disturbing interests. He once made a chilling comment, expressing enjoyment in saying that if a serial killer were active in the area, it would be him. Although he liked to boast about such things, people generally did not take him seriously. Jason was described as having long, curly blonde hair and was 20 years old at the time of these events. His mother was indifferent towards him, even hiding food in his room. The family frequently moved, faced evictions due to unpaid rent, and often lived in unstable conditions. Jason had a difficult childhood, living in a car and facing a harsh environment. He was addicted to alcohol and drugs, bullied weaker children and started harming animals. His father was also addicted to drugs and treated him badly. During Jason's school years, his father was incarcerated for a long time, but it had a serious impact on his mental health. Jason was involved in various petty crimes, including stalking. There was an incident where he killed a girl's dog because she rejected his advances, and he continued to stalk her, leaving her extremely scared. As a child, Jason loved his younger brother but grew to hate adults. As an adult, his feelings for women became entwined with violent fantasies. He also believed in ghosts and thought he could hear them speaking to him, influenced by religious stories told to him by his devout grandmother. The year the two teenagers were murdered, he was sentenced to 12 months in prison after a police officer discovered a dead cat and some suspicious cutting tools in his car. Unfortunately, he was released early and never faced the consequences of his actions. Police reported that when Jason was arrested, he was wearing handcuffs and appeared to be enjoying the situation. Jason did not resist arrest and confidently stated that he would be released soon. After searching his home, police found numerous newspaper clippings about the murders, a collection of adult videos, a box filled with handcuffs, and knives that had traces of blood. His room also contained books on satanic themes. In the Jason's car, a brown 1982 Subaru, forensic experts discovered what appeared to be blood stains, particularly concentrated in the trunk. They also found duct tape with light hair that did not belong to the Jason, a receipt for ammunition, a hunting knife, and a brown carpet with fibers matching those found at the crime scene. During questioning, the Jason denied any involvement in the crimes. He assumed he knew where the severed body parts were and even offered to lead the police to them. They searched the forest for several hours together but found nothing. After returning to the station, Jason requested a lawyer and stopped cooperating with the police. Soon after, the police received an anonymous tip suggesting that Jason was the only one who could be responsible for the teenagers' massacre. Later, a witness emerged who had spent much of the evening of July 26 with Jason. She stated that he had left home acting strangely aggressive, likely due to drug use. She noticed he had handcuffs and a gun, which made her uneasy, but she didn't report it to the police because she was afraid of him. The girl later said that Jason owned a .22 caliber pistol, the same type used to shoot the Brian and Christina, and that he had purchased ammunition shortly before killing the two children. DNA evidence from blood and hair found in his car matched the victims. Police gathered more and more circumstantial evidence linking Jason to the massacre, while he had no alibi. That evening, his friends and acquaintances found him strange, and some even felt afraid of him. A teacher from the school Jason attended said he was fixated on disturbing images, including satanic symbols. He often spoke about murders, which frightened some of his classmates. At that point, there was no solid evidence against him. To establish Jason's connection, the FBI was called in to create a criminal profile using photographs from the crime scene. During the investigation, it was discovered that Jason's mother had discovered several of Jason's notebooks the previous June. These notebooks contained disturbing content, including a list of girls Jason wanted to kill, with detailed descriptions of the violent acts he fantasized about. Christina was at the top of the list. The alarming nature of the diary prompted Jason's mother to seek help from a psychotherapy clinic after reading them. A psychiatrist assessed Jason and concluded that he posed a danger to himself and society, leading to his admission for intensive care and further observation. However, not all medical professionals agreed with the diagnosis of antisocial disorder. Most doctors, after conducting evaluations, opposed this diagnosis, resulting in Jason's release from the clinic without further treatment. Jason's writings became crucial evidence in the case, as they showed his obsession with thoughts of murder and torture directed at young girls for several years. He claimed that his desire to kill was motivated purely by sexual arousal. On March 17, 1994, Jason was charged with 2 counts of premeditated murder, yet he maintained his innocence. 3 weeks after the charges were filed, the hearings commenced. The prosecutor's office intended to pursue the death penalty for the defendant, which is permitted under Texas law. The hearing started on September 28, 1994. The prosecution alleged that in mid-July 1993, Jason confided in a friend that he had obtained ammunition, knives, and handcuffs, and that he had devised a plan to kidnap Christina from her home. He used Brian to entice both teenagers into a car, claiming they were going to a party. Once inside, he quickly disposed of the boy and shot him in the car. Christina attempted to flee, but he injured her, caught her, and proceeded to torment her. The prosecution worried that Jason could evade justice since the public defender argued that the investigation was biased. The police focused only on Jason as a suspect after hearing about a mysterious individual, neglecting to consider other possibilities. The defense lawyer pointed out to the jury that the evidence and assumptions made by the prosecution needed further investigation. Jason's sister testified during the trial, sharing details about their challenging childhood. They often attended school unwashed, beaten, and hungry. As a result, Jason struggled to focus on his studies, despite his efforts. However, her testimony backfired when the prosecution pointed out that, despite their hardships, his sister managed to lead a decent life without committing violence. This was argued as a reason why Jason's background couldn't justify his cruel actions. The prosecution's team included a forensic expert and a forensic entomologist, who provided a thorough report on Christina's autopsy and the severe injuries she endured. Their findings indicated a brutal and unrestrained act of violence, suggesting that allowing Jason to leave the courtroom would be a grave injustice. One of the witnesses for the prosecution was Chris Nowlin, the same friend who was driving the car that transported the teenagers from their home. He chose to cooperate with the prosecution by testifying against Jason in exchange for immunity from criminal charges related to his involvement. Jason convinces his friend Chris to meet his girlfriend. Jason lies that he has been dating Christina since high school. When they reach a secluded area near a bridge, where Jason reveals his dark intentions to Chris. He plans to take Christina and Brian into the woods, kill them, and attack the girl. Chris dismisses Jason's words, as he often jokes about such things and never carries them out. Jason's former classmate testified that he had been stalking Christina for an extended period. After she rejected his advances in 7th grade, he killed her dog out of revenge and used its blood to stain her parents' car. The stalker also sent her disturbing photos of decapitated women, claiming this was how she would end up. A gun store salesman confirmed that he sold ammunition to Jason, which was later matched to the ammunition used in the murders. The day after the crime, Jason went to the wash to clean the car, but forensic experts discovered important evidence there. According to Jason's mother, he had joined a religious community shortly before the massacre, and she believed he was genuinely trying to change his ways. However, diary entries presented in court painted a different picture. They revealed that he was actually planning the crime. On the day of the hearing, a tourist was exploring the woods near where the teenagers were found murdered and stumbled upon an old, rusty refrigerator. Curious, he approached and opened the refrigerator, and was horrified to discover 30 animal skulls inside. He also found 4 red and yellow skulls in plastic bags. The skulls were accompanied by diaries written in a strange, messy handwriting, titled The Book of Murders. The diaries, which began in 1989 and ended on the day of the 1993 murders of Christina and Brian, detailed his grisly experiments with animals and outlined his plans for Christina, which he then carried out exactly as described. He had previously made attempts to commit murder but had failed, which frustrated him. His violent urges were partly driven by his hatred for his mother and a desire to kill her. Additionally, his grandmother often told him stories about demons, which may have shaped his thoughts. This evidence led the prosecutor's office to conclude that Christina's murder was premeditated. Jason described himself as a killing machine in his diaries. After both the prosecution and defense delivered their closing statements, the jury began deliberating the verdict. After 3 hours, they found Jason Massey guilty of 2 counts of first-degree murder. The next step was to evaluate the aggravating and mitigating circumstances to determine whether the death penalty was appropriate. The prosecution presented evidence from Jason's own diary, which detailed his gruesome actions, including the murders of 4 cats, 7 dogs, and numerous calves. He had a disturbing obsession with collecting animal heads as trophies. Testimonies from a few of Jason's friends revealed that he viewed acts of cruelty as a display of power and wanted to showcase it. The diary entries also indicated that he had no intention of stopping his violent behavior. One of his last entries expressed a desire to become the most notorious serial killer in the United States, claiming that he planned to kill over the next 20 years. It took the jury just 15 minutes to decide on the death penalty for Jason Massey on October 12, 1994. After the verdict was announced, the judge stated that executing Jason was a more humane option than what he had done to his victims. When Jason was taken to death row, he claimed that he had placed Christina's hands and head in a pillowcase along with her clothes and thrown them into the river. However, police were skeptical of his account, as he often kept trophies from his crimes. Jason was shocked by the conviction. He was determined to fight the verdict, so his lawyer filed an appeal on his behalf. Many advocates, including a Canadian coalition against the death penalty, spoke out in his support. Human rights advocates argued that the death penalty was inhumane and criticized the investigation, claiming that it was poorly conducted and ignored other potential suspects who were in the car during the kidnapping of Christina and Brian. Despite their efforts, their actions were ultimately in vain. On the evening of April 3, 2001, Jason was led to the execution chamber. For his last meal, he chose chicken legs, fried pumpkin, fried eggplant, mashed potatoes, green peas, boiled cabbage, corn, spinach with cheese, caramel fudge, pecans, ice cream, and a pot of sweet tea. Before his execution, Jason spoke to the victims' families, expressing his remorse for his actions. Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Michelle Herndon. Michelle Herndon was born in 1981 in a small Florida town with a population of just 7,000. After finishing school, she enrolled at the University of Florida in Gainesville in 1999. Michelle joined the Peace Corps as a volunteer, assisting both people and animals. Michelle suffered from chronic, debilitating migraines. These attacks caused her to experience severe pain on a daily basis, accompanied by symptoms such as nausea and extreme sensitivity to light, smell, and sound. Despite trying medications, herbal teas, and numerous visits to the doctor, nothing helped ease her pain. In 2005, a new school year began. Michelle returned to university to continue her studies. To cover her tuition and rent, she worked at a fitness center. With limited funds, she rented a small apartment far from campus. At that time, Michelle was in a complicated long-distance relationship with a guy named Jason. Her best friend, Jessica, whom she met at university, lived on campus. They worked together, talked frequently, and often visited each other. Jessica's roommate was Oliver O'Quinn, a 27-year-old student from Georgia. Oliver was a great roommate and a friend to both Jessica and Michelle. The three have often spent time together. Michelle shared her relationship problems with Jason, and Jessica was always supportive. Oliver offered advice from a male perspective. Being a bit older and more experienced, they often valued his wisdom. Oliver, a nurse in the hospital's surgical department, began helping Michelle manage her debilitating migraines after learning about them. The hospital provided strong medications that greatly relieved her pain, allowing Michelle to finally enjoy life without those severe headaches. Surprisingly, Oliver had previously served in the Air Force and worked in Africa. Michelle dreamed of moving to Africa to help animals. She and Oliver could talk endlessly about it. Michelle decided to take a break from her long-distance relationship with her boyfriend, Jason. During this time, she met Scott, a funny musician who played guitar in a band. Michelle felt very comfortable with Scott. However, in mid-October 2005, Jason returned and pleaded with Michelle to reconcile, and she agreed. She began making plans to spend Thanksgiving together. Meanwhile, Oliver was not impressed with any of Michelle's boyfriends, considering them frivolous and unreliable. The reason was that Oliver was in love with Michelle. Many acquaintances had suspected this for a while, noting the way he interacted with her and the way he looked at her. Oliver was constantly involved in her relationships and even accompanied her on dates, which seemed awkward, but Michelle didn't mind. She believed that they were just friends and didn't see anything wrong with that. At the end of October 2005, Michelle met with Jessica to share some exciting news. She and Jason had decided that she would move in with him, 500 kilometers away. Jessica was thrilled for Michelle, congratulated her, and asked about Oliver, but Michelle didn't respond. Michelle began getting ready for the move, balancing her busy schedule of studies, work, volunteer activities, and now packing and buying household essentials. Despite the hectic pace, she enjoyed these tasks. As a result, Michelle and Jessica saw each other less frequently, usually only catching up during their weekend volunteer work. They planned to have dinner together on November 9, 2005, looking forward to catching up and sharing stories. However, Michelle didn't show up for the meeting that evening, which was uncharacteristic of her. Jessica tried to call her friend, but she didn't answer. She assumed Michelle was upset about something and believed that was why she didn't show up. Jessica left several messages asking Michelle to explain what happened and why she was upset, but Michelle never responded. Jessica decided not to wait any longer and went home. When she got home, her phone was dead, so she charged it and went to bed. The next morning, on November 10th, Jessica discovered many voice messages on her phone. One was from the fitness center where both girls worked. The administrator asked about Michelle's absence, as she had not been at work for a couple of days. Their shifts didn't overlap, so they didn't see each other at work, leaving Jessica unaware of Michelle's absences. Understanding the significance of this project to Michelle, Jessica became anxious. She worried that something might have happened to Michelle. Jessica tried calling Michelle again, but there was no response. She then reached out to all her friends, but none of them knew where Michelle was. Concerned, Jessica got into her car and headed to Michelle's house to check on her. Meanwhile, after learning about her daughter's disappearance, Michelle's mother also drove to another city to find her. The drive took about an hour. When Jessica, who arrived first at Michelle's residence, got there, she saw police officers had sealed off the area as a crime scene. It was then that she received the heartbreaking news: Michelle had died. Nearby, she noticed a distressed Jason. Michelle's mother later arrived at the house and made the horrifying discovery that her daughter was dead. There was no sign of forced entry into the apartment. All the doors and windows were closed, the lights were off, but the TV was on very loudly. Nothing had been stolen. Police found the body cold, indicating that Michelle had been dead for some time. She was lying face down with her left arm underneath her body. There were no wounds, bruises, or injuries that would indicate a violent death. It appeared that Michelle had fallen asleep and never woke up. Police believe that Michelle, 24, died of natural causes. Her body was sent for an autopsy and police conducted standard procedures, interviewed neighbors, and asked forensic experts to examine the scene. No fingerprints or DNA were found near the body, and neighbors did not hear or see anything suspicious. Police believe Michelle had used illegal drugs and died of an overdose. Police searched the apartment for drugs or paraphernalia but found nothing. There were only a few bottles of beer in the refrigerator. Next to Michelle's body on the bed was a half-empty beer bottle, which had only her fingerprints on it. As a precaution, the opened bottle was sent to a lab to be tested for any foreign substances or possible poisoning. Tests showed that nothing had been added to the beer. The medical examiner was unable to determine the cause of Michelle's death. She appeared to be completely healthy, with no illnesses other than migraines, which were unlikely to have been a significant factor. This led to many questions about how a young, healthy girl could fall asleep and not wake up. The position of her body was unusual for a natural death, raising further doubts. The expert concluded that Michelle died on the night of November 8th. The medical examiner is continuing a more thorough investigation to uncover the truth. Meanwhile, the police are looking into who she might have been in contact with around that time. Initially, questions emerged regarding Michelle's boyfriend, Jason, who was the first to arrive at her apartment and call the police. How did he end up there when he lived 500 kilometers away in a different city? Police brought Jason to the police station for questioning. Jason explained that he hadn't been able to contact Michelle for 2 days. Concerned, he drove over 5 hours overnight to check on her. Upon arriving on the morning of November 10th, he knocked on her door, but no one answered. He continued calling and knocking without success. Seeing Michelle's car in the parking lot, hearing her dog barking inside, and her phone ringing, he feared something was wrong. Looking through the window, he saw Michelle lying motionless on the bed. He then immediately called 911. The police arrived, broke down the door and found Michelle's body in the apartment. Jason appeared very sad and distressed. He had an alibi for the time of Michelle's death because he was in another city, so the police released him. The medical examiner provided new information after a careful examination of Michelle's body. A small needle wound was found on her left hand, located under her body. Police contacted her doctor to see if Michelle had undergone any tests or procedures the day before, but the doctor said no. The needle wound was in an unusual location, atypical for an injection. No illegal substances were found in her home and toxicology tests showed no illegal substances in her system. Police also observed that a trash bag may have been missing from Michelle's apartment. They speculate that someone injected something into Michelle, causing her death, and then threw the trash bag away to remove the evidence. Police searched the trash cans on the street near her home and found Michelle's trash because it had not been collected. They found checks and letters with her name on them, along with a syringe and a bottle of painkillers. This prescription drug is very dangerous and an overdose can be fatal. Toxicology testing for this drug had never been done before because it requires a special test. The medical examiner who performed the autopsy had never encountered this drug in her many years of practice. When the final test was done, it was found that Michelle's body contained a very high concentration of the drug, which caused her death without leaving any trace. This drug is not commonly used for general use. It is mainly used by anesthesiologists during surgery. The police interviewed Michelle's friend Jessica and learned about her complicated relationships with Jason, Scott, and Oliver. This information intrigued the police, as they suspected that one of these men might have harmed Michelle out of jealousy. However, who could it have been? Jason had already been ruled out as a suspect. According to a friend, Michelle's relationship with Scott was very brief and hadn't really developed. He understood when Michelle returned to her ex and stayed out of her life. Michelle was deeply in love with Jason and wanted to be with him, while she saw Oliver as just a friend, although he wanted more from her. Oliver soon became a suspect. In hindsight, Jessica realized there were many warning signs in Oliver's behavior. He followed Michelle everywhere, but it seemed sweet and innocent, so no one saw him as a threat. During a conversation with the police, Michelle's grief-stricken mother mentioned that the last time she spoke to her daughter was around 11 p.m. on November 7th. This made her the last person to speak with Michelle. Michelle's final words to her mother were that Oliver was supposed to come over to help her fill out some documents. The police found it strange that she invited a guy over late at night, especially when he had feelings for her and she didn't like him. There had to be a reason for this. It was revealed that Oliver worked in the hospital's surgical department and had access to a variety of drugs, including painkillers. He had previously helped Michelle with her migraines. Michelle's landlord, Peter, came to the police station to share a strange story about her. About a week before Michelle died, Peter needed to pick up some things from her apartment but couldn't get in touch with her. This was unusual for Michelle, who always paid her rent on time, kept the apartment clean, and didn't ignore him. Concerned, Peter went to the apartment and knocked on the door, but it took a long time for anyone to answer. Finally, a shirtless man with messy black hair and glasses opened the door. He looked outside for a moment and said that this wasn't a good time. Peter explained that he needed to get his things. However, the man slammed the door shut and told Peter to come back in a few hours. Peter was confused and did not understand the situation. After he left, Michelle called him back to apologize for the unpleasant situation. She explained that she had a severe migraine and her friend was treating her. Peter saw a picture of Oliver and recognized him as the man in Michelle's apartment. The police found a butterfly needle in Michelle's bag at her apartment. This type of needle is often used to inject drugs. Jessica confirmed that Oliver had given Michelle medication to relieve her migraine. Jessica also mentioned that Michelle was afraid of regular needles, so Oliver used a small butterfly syringe instead. Michelle could not inject the needle herself because she was too afraid to even look at it. If she injected the drug incorrectly, she would die immediately. So the drug was administered by someone with medical knowledge. This again pointed to Oliver's involvement. The police finally understood why Michelle had remained friends with Oliver and invited him to her home. He had provided her with a strong painkiller. Police did not find Oliver's fingerprints on the syringe or vial. He may have worn gloves and disposed of them elsewhere, leaving only Michelle's DNA. To charge him, the police would need to link the syringe to Oliver. The vials had a unique identification number, indicating they came from the department where Oliver worked. The drugs were stored in a special refrigerator that required a patient number and staff name to retrieve the drugs. This discovery confirmed that Oliver had taken the vials. Later, the police went to the hospital to talk to Oliver, but he did not show up for work. It was discovered that he had been fired on November 9th, shortly after Michelle's murder. Police suspected that he had been fired for using dangerous drugs, but hospital management denied this, saying that Oliver had been fired because his skills did not meet their standards. However, rumors circulated in the hospital that Oliver had been fired due to a shortage of medication. The police found out that Oliver was working at another clinic. They went to the clinic and spoke to a nurse who was surprised to see them. Oliver was then taken to the police station for questioning. He said that he had heard about Michelle's death from someone and expressed his condolences. The police were surprised and asked if they were close friends. Oliver replied that they were just acquaintances. The police then asked why he talked to her on the phone every day. Oliver did not answer. Instead, he said that he had to get back to work and left. At that time, the police did not have a warrant for his arrest. Oliver calmly arrived on campus and collected his things. The guy told Jessica at the end that he was going on vacation and left. It turned out that Oliver went to visit his ex-wife and daughter and then flew to his homeland in Ireland. There, he received a license and got a job at the hospital. After the police took the bottle of painkillers used on Michelle for analysis, the DNA test results came back. Confirmed that there was Oliver's DNA on the bottle cap, indicating that he had injected Michelle with a fatal dose of the drug. The police discovered that Oliver had left but was unable to act, despite having a warrant for his arrest. Extradition to the United States is often controversial for countries that oppose the death penalty. In this case, an Irish journalist alerted the police to Michelle's story. He proposed publishing an article detailing Michelle's death and highlighting Oliver's possible involvement, including his photograph and arrest warrant, to alert the public. The police approved and the article was published in April 2006. Upon reading the article, Oliver fled the country to Africa, where he had previously worked, fearing public backlash. He was eventually tracked down, arrested, and extradited to the US, where he was jailed. Oliver was charged with Michelle's murder but pleaded not guilty. His lawyers argued it was an accident, claiming that Michelle had requested Oliver to inject her with drugs for pain relief. That evening, Oliver miscalculated the dose, inadvertently giving her a lethal amount, leading to her death. The dose administered was 4 times the lethal amount, which was surprising since no one could believe an experienced nurse familiar with the drug would make such an error. Oliver did not apologize to the deceased's family for this mistake. The prosecutor had a different theory, suggesting that Oliver killed Michelle out of jealousy and revenge, as he did not want to share her with another man. It was alleged that he deliberately gave her the fatal dose with the intent to murder. During the trial, witnesses stated that Oliver was in love with Michelle and had been stalking her. Additionally, Oliver's cellmate testified that Oliver confessed to being deeply in love with Michelle, but she did not return his feelings. Oliver overheard a conversation between Michelle and Jason, where she professed her love for Jason and said Oliver meant nothing to her. Feeling humiliated by this, Oliver allegedly decided to take revenge by ending her life. Oliver had gained Michelle's trust through his medical care. However, he exploited this trust by injecting her with a quadruple lethal dose of medication. As a result, the jury convicted Oliver O'Quinn of first-degree murder, and he received a life sentence without the chance for parole. Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Mark Despain. On Wednesday afternoon, August 24, 2011, 33-year-old Michelle Despain left work to collect some urgent documents from home. She arrived back from the bank around 3 p.m. and noticed the back door was unlocked, which alarmed her. Upon entering, she found the house completely ransacked. Drawers were open, items were scattered everywhere, there was broken glass on the floor, some clothes were tossed in the bathtub, and a jewelry box was open in the bedroom. Then she made a horrifying discovery. Her husband Mark was lying unconscious on the kitchen floor. He had been shot and was bleeding. Frightened, Michelle screamed and ran outside. She called 911 and told them that robbers had broken into the house and shot her husband. The police then arrived at the scene of the crime. When the police and ambulance arrived, they found the house in complete chaos. At first, it appeared that a robbery had taken place. Doctors later confirmed that Mark had been dead in the kitchen. The medical examiner stated that Mark had been dead about an hour before the police arrived. He had 2 gunshot wounds, one to the chest and one to the head. Burns to his skin indicated that he had been shot at close range. After a careful examination, the police suspected that the crime scene was staged. They discovered that on the day of the incident, Mark was at home, then had lunch with Michelle at a cafe. After lunch, they had ice cream and took some dessert home. Michelle then went back to work, while Mark returned home. The police questioned why the robbers executed Mark at close range, suspecting that this was a planned attack rather than a spontaneous act of violence during a robbery. The police started gathering detailed information about Mark Despain and his family. Mark began dating Michelle when she was 18 and he was 19, though they had known each other since school. Michelle had a young daughter from a previous relationship. Soon, they decided to live together, and Mark's parents bought them a trailer. Mark treated Michelle's daughter as his own and worked in the family business as an investor and real estate appraiser. As Mark's career advanced, he founded his own company and earned a substantial income. The couple moved from a trailer to a large, beautiful house with a swimming pool in a prestigious area of Jonesboro, Arkansas, USA. Michelle and Mark had 2 more children together, and their family of 5 appeared friendly, wealthy, and happy. They vacationed at expensive resorts several times a year, including trips to Mexico and Disneyland. Initially, Michelle was a housewife but later began helping Mark with his business and worked at a local bank. Despite Mark offering for her to stay home, she wanted to pursue her career. After Mark's suspicious death, Michelle became the prime suspect in the case. She was summoned to the police station for questioning. Michelle claimed that she had a solid alibi, as she was at work that day and only went home for work-related reasons, where she accidentally discovered her husband's body. Her alibi was confirmed by surveillance camera footage showing her returning to work after lunch at the time her husband was murdered. As a result, suspicions against Michelle were dismissed. The police interviewed neighbors, who mentioned seeing a suspicious black man driving an old blue Mercedes in the area on the day of the crime. Police considered whether Mark had any enemies or people who might have wanted to harm him. Some family acquaintances described Mark as a powerful and ambitious man who could have made enemies. A work check revealed that he was scheduled to work that day but suddenly decided to go hunting and stay home. Police spoke with Michelle again to clarify the timeline of events and possibly uncover new details they may have missed before. Michelle told police that she met Mark for lunch that day. They went to a coffee shop near the bank where she worked. After lunch, Michelle returned to work at 1:30 p.m. and returned home again after 2:30 p.m., where she found Mark murdered. This time, however, Michelle revealed new details. She said that when she saw Mark lying on the floor in a pool of blood, she approached him to check if he was still alive. Michelle shook Mark's leg and called his name, but he didn't respond, so she assumed he was dead. Michelle ran out of the house and called 911, then waited for the police to arrive. She called her mother, explained what had happened and asked her to come. When her mother arrived, Michelle was near her house, and the police and ambulance were already on the scene. The police asked Michelle if she knew anyone who might want to harm her husband. To everyone's surprise, she confidently named Mark's father, Jack. Michelle explained her reasons for suspecting him. Initially, when she and Mark got together, his parents seemed like good people. They even bought them a trailer to start their life and supported Mark in his work at his father's company for several years. However, after Mark became a successful employee, he wanted more responsibility and asked his father for a larger share of the company. His father refused, leading to a fallout between them. Mark then decided to leave and start his own company. Jack was upset about this, and since then, they hadn't communicated. Michelle realized that Jack was cruel and cold-hearted after getting to know her husband's parents better. Jack immediately disliked her daughter from a previous marriage, and a serious feud erupted between him and the 13-year-old. Jack also showed hostility towards Michelle herself, leading her to suspect he might harm Mark out of spite. Michelle's father shared her concerns, having encountered Mark's father while working for him and believing Jack capable of murder. He even heard Jack threaten his own son with violence, and they had a strained relationship due to a business dispute. The police took note of this information and began investigating the relationship between Mark and his father. They discovered that Mark and Jack had argued over money and the company years ago, leading to a strained relationship. However, it was unclear why the father suddenly decided to kill his son at this time. The police spoke to Mark's parents. The father confirmed the argument but mentioned that the money dispute started because of Michelle's influence. According to them, Michelle always wanted more and was never satisfied with their financial situation. Even though Mark made a lot of money, she insisted that he ask his father to transfer most of the company to him. During their arguments, it was clear that Michelle was to blame for everything. Jack said that they kept in touch with their son despite their arguments, but ignored Michelle. Shortly before the tragedy, Mark revealed his intention to divorce his wife. That day, Mark called Jack, asking him to stop by the house to buy hunting supplies. The father noted that only Michelle knew he would be home that day. Mark's mother mentioned that Michelle feared divorce because it would mean losing the finances and status she had enjoyed from Mark. Her parents advised the police to investigate Michelle's actions on the day of the murder further, suggesting that she may be more complex than she appears. The father suspected that she was involved in the case, perhaps not as a killer but as an organizer. Jack reported an incident that Michelle had mentioned to the police, involving a conflict with Michelle's daughter, Brooke. Jack discovered that Brooke was having a romantic relationship with her boyfriend and found several revealing photos on her phone. Jack warned her to end the relationship and stop taking such photos, and threatened to tell her parents. In retaliation, Brooke used Jack's phone to take topless selfies and sent them to her boyfriend, then told her mother that Jack had been harassing her and taking inappropriate photos. Michelle was furious when she found the photos on Jack's phone and accused him of taking them. Jack denied the accusations, and Michelle fought back, leading to a fight. After the incident, Jack's wife left him and filed for divorce, suspecting him of child molestation. Michelle reported Jack to the police, but the investigation revealed that Jack was not involved. It was confirmed that the photos were taken by Brooke herself. No charges were filed against him, and Jack's wife returned after the truth was revealed. However, the experience left a lasting negative impact on their relationship, damaging Jack's reputation and health. They decided to cut ties with Michelle and her daughter, allowing her to raise Brooke as she wished. Brooke later admitted that her mother had convinced her to take the photos to damage Jack's reputation and alienate Mark from his father, and their plan almost succeeded. Jack and his wife were not considered suspects because they had a solid alibi. They were on vacation in another city on the day of the murder. Based on a tip from Mark's father, the police turned their attention to Michelle. They wanted to understand why Michelle would kill her husband and what her motive might be. Michelle and Mark had shared 15 happy years together, raising 2 children and building a successful business. They lived a comfortable life without any financial worries. So why would Michelle kill her husband and risk losing the family's main source of income? Police quickly uncovered that Michelle was not the grieving widow she appeared to be. In reality, she was having an affair with a younger colleague, who was 24 years old, a few months before Mark's death. She fully supported him financially, covering his apartment, groceries, and all bills with the money her husband earned. The police also learned that Mark had significant debt totaling about $2 million, despite his substantial wealth. Michelle was found to be taking money from her husband's business account, and it was discovered that Mark had 2 life insurance policies totaling $1 million. This new evidence further raised suspicions about Michelle, leading police to call her in for questioning. Police questioned Michelle about an affair with another man. She admitted to having a new romantic interest in a young man but insisted her husband was unaware of the affair. Michelle explained that their marriage had been troubled for a long time and they were discussing divorce. She planned to move out soon but denied any involvement in her husband's murder. Michelle argued that she had no motive to kill him, as he was a loving father and will pay a large alimony. Despite their suspicions, the police lacked concrete evidence against Michelle. Surveillance camera footage from the bank where Michelle worked confirmed her presence at work during the murder. The investigation hit a dead end. The case took a dramatic turn when police received information from a person who reported that someone was bragging about killing Mark Despain. The person was identified as Terrence Barker. Police investigated and discovered that Terrence's phone had been near Mark's home at the time of the murder. They also learned that a friend of Terrence owned an old blue Mercedes. When Mark's neighbors, who had seen the African American in the Mercedes, were shown Terrence's photo, they identified him. Police located Terrence and brought him in for questioning. Although Terrence initially denied any involvement, Terrence eventually confessed to shooting Mark. He revealed that a client had promised to pay him $10,000 for the murder, which was why he accepted the job. However, he refused to reveal the client's identity and claimed that he had not yet been paid for the murder. Terrence was arrested and charged with murder. Police found and questioned Johnny Hubbard, the driver of the blue Mercedes and Mark's friend. Police hoped Johnny would cooperate with the police and share information. Johnny was one of Mark's tenants and knew Michelle's father, Carl Kelly. Johnny agreed to assist the police and reveal everything. He explained that Carl had approached him about Mark's murder and would pay him money. Terrence knows about this plan and also wants to join to make money. They met Carl in a parking lot near the church to plan the crime. Their plan was for Terrence to shoot Mark. Even though Terrence did not know Mark, he agreed to join in for the money. As a result, Johnny was arrested and charged with murder. When Terrence found out about Johnny's testimony against him, he decided to reveal everything as well. He confirmed his friend's account and added that Carl gave him a gun near the church, which he used to shoot Mark. Carl showed them Mark's house and said they needed to wait for his command to carry out the murder. On the day of the crime, Terrence also revealed that not only was Carl involved, but his daughter Michelle was too. Michelle was the mastermind behind the operation, giving her father instructions over the phone. Her father helped her with everything and covered for her. Police reviewed the messages between Michelle and her father and discovered a text that exposed her involvement. At 8:20 a.m. on the day of the murder, she texted her father, "I can't live like this, it's been a terrible morning." Her father replied, "Okay, you can take him out to lunch." The police believed that Michelle had arranged to meet Mark for lunch that day, which gave her father the chance to take Terrence into the house, hide there, and wait for Mark to return home so he could shoot him. Carl's phone records showed that he was present at the crime scene during the murder and played a role in the planning. An analysis of Michelle's communications with her husband on the day of the murder showed that she invited Mark to lunch. He initially refused because he was planning to go hunting, but she insisted and asked her husband to meet, and he eventually agreed. Throughout their lunch, Michelle kept in touch with her father via text message, informing Carl when they had finished eating and when Mark was on his way home. Michelle and her father were arrested. Michelle initially denied any involvement, but eventually confessed and claimed that her father was solely responsible for the crime. She said that her father had planned the crime, motivated by insurance money and a desire to take over the family business. However, the police were skeptical of her claim because she had sent her father a text message that morning urging them to kill. Carl eventually admitted his role in the crime. Michelle and her father, Carl Kelly, were charged with first-degree murder of Mark. The 4 people arrested in the case later agreed to plead guilty to the prosecution, which reduced their sentences but also prevented them from appealing the court's decision in the future. Mark's parents accepted the deal because they wanted to avoid a lengthy trial. Terrence Barker and Carl Kelly received sentences of 35 years each, Johnny Hubbard was sentenced to 18 years, and Michelle Despain received 30 years. Hello, crime enthusiasts, are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Sophia Urrutia. The Urrutia family lived in Canning Vale, a suburb of Perth with about 35,000 residents. The family included 7 members and a dog. The children were Isabel, the youngest at 3 years old, Sophia, who was 8, Ines, 11, and Gabriel, who was 14. The parents, though busy with work, maintained a close relationship with their children and treated them well. Josephine, the mother, was a loving and caring woman who worked hard to provide comfort for her family and manage the household. Caring for children from toddler to teenager is a challenging task because the needs of children at each stage are different. The father often had to go on business trips to Hong Kong, resulting in frequent absences from home. 8 years old Sophia Urrutia, a girl attending a Catholic elementary school where she was loved by all her classmates and teachers. Sophia was well-mannered, naturally tactful, inquisitive. She helped her mother and took care of her younger sister. Sophia had many hobbies, including painting and dancing. Her uncle, who lived with them, often helped with the children and frequently took them on outings. On June 26, 2006, the kids eagerly await a trip to the mall. Little do they know that a dangerous force is also at work there. It was a regular weekday. The uncle picked up the children after school, and they went to the local shopping center, Leamington. It was a small shopping area, but it had everything local residents needed. 3 children were with their uncle, 14 years old Gabriel, 11 years old Ines, and 8 years old Sophia. During their walk, Sophia excitedly shared that she had been chosen to perform an interesting Indonesian dance. She was thrilled and proud, and her uncle and siblings praised her. While at the shopping center, Sophia needed to use the restroom and informed them at the checkout. Being familiar with the shopping center, her uncle allowed her to go alone while they finished unpacking and paying for their items. The restroom wasn't far, and Sophia ran off by herself. The uncle watched her until she entered the restroom, not realizing it would be the last time he saw her alive. After paying, they left the store and went to wait for Sophia outside the restroom, but she took longer than expected. Concerned, the uncle moved closer to call out to her, but there was no response. He didn't enter the women's restroom, so he sent Gabriel and Ines to check both the women's and men's restrooms. Ines knocked on the women's door, but there was no answer. Gabriel checked the men's restroom, but it was silent. They also tried the nearby disabled restroom, where they heard some noise, but a male voice responded that it was occupied, scaring them away. Worried, Gabriel and Ines thought Sophia might have exited through another door, possibly heading to a restaurant or becoming lost in the shopping center. Sophia's uncle waited in the hallway, while the rest searched for her around the shopping center. After 10 minutes, Gabriel couldn't wait any longer and went back to the toilets to call out to her, thinking she hadn't heard him. As he approached the disabled toilet, the door suddenly swung open. A tough-looking guy, about 20 years old, emerged. Their eyes met briefly, and Gabriel instinctively felt something was wrong. Gabriel immediately noticed Sophia's discarded school uniform in the waste bin. He moved closer and saw a lifeless, naked body on the floor. By then, the guy had already run down the corridor and was out of sight. Gabriel rushed to Sophia, but she showed no signs of life. He began to scream in the toilet. The uncle and the other children who were with Sophia at the mall that day quickly arrived at the scene. The police were called immediately, and mall security was notified. The entire mall was closed. Top doctors confirmed the girl's death. They couldn't save her. Forensic experts sealed the toilet and began examining the crime scene to ensure no important evidence was damaged or lost. Gabriel, who witnessed the criminal, was able to describe him, prompting police to search the mall for the suspicious man who had emerged from the handicapped restroom. During their initial search, the police could not locate him within the premises and assumed he had already escaped. The public was shocked by the brutal crime that had taken place. In what seemed like a safe, quiet place, no one imagined that letting a child go to the toilet could result in losing them forever. This murder would later be deemed the most brutal in Western Australia's history due to the horrific nature of the crime and Sophia's injuries. Unfortunately, the CCTV cameras in the corridor were not working that day. At the time, detectives only had a description provided by Gabriel, which was clearly insufficient. The crime was committed with horrifying brutality. The child, Sophia, died from suffocation. The attacker not only cut off her air supply but also squeezed her neck so forcefully that her larynx was completely crushed. Her arms were dislocated, and she suffered severe injuries and ruptures due to forced sexual assault. The forensic expert concluded that the attack lasted about 5 minutes, during which the attacker brutally harmed she. Even the most seasoned detectives, who regularly deal with various crimes, also described the case as the most serious they had ever encountered. Sophia had no reason to use the disabled toilet. It was possible that she was quickly dragged inside by someone. The criminal was probably already inside, waiting for a victim, and Sophia was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time, becoming an unintended victim. She was seized so suddenly that she didn't have time to scream. The attacker immediately began strangling her. She stood no chance against an adult man and couldn't even call for help, even though her relatives were nearby and heard nothing. Investigators began compiling a list of all sex offenders in the area and questioned shopping center employees using a portrait of the suspect. It was urgent to find the criminal because panic was spreading throughout the city. People were terrified by the brutal attack on a young girl and were afraid to go outside. Several shopping center employees recognized the man in the portrait as 21 years old Dante Wyndham Arthurs. He is fat, looks very pale, and worked as a packer of vegetables and fruits at one of the stores in the shopping center. On the day of the incident, Dante was on shift but then disappeared. The police became interested in him and checked his criminal history. They discovered that 3 years prior to this murder, he had been arrested for sexually assaulting another 8-year-old girl. At that time, the police lacked sufficient evidence to charge him, so he was released. Early the next morning, around 5 o'clock, detectives, knowing Dante's address, went to his home, where he lived with his parents, just a short distance from the shopping center. They interrogated Dante and searched his residence. During the search, investigators discovered a sports bag containing latex gloves, handcuffs, rope, a knife, and several photographs with personal information. The oldest girl in the photos was 15 years old, and the others were younger. Some photos included details such as names, ages, home addresses, and the shortest routes to reach them using public transport, suggesting he was stalking these girls and planning attacks. However, Sophia was not among these photos. Within hours, Dante was arrested and charged with first-degree murder, as well as sexual assault and forcible detention of Sophia. Dante Wyndham Arthurs was born on August 8, 1984, in Western Australia. His family soon moved to the UK, where they lived for 8 years before returning to Australia. As a teenager, he was diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome, a condition marked by difficulties with social communication and repetitive, obsessive behavior. During questioning, he neither confirmed nor denied his guilt and did not take the events seriously. He described the situation as if he were an outsider watching the horrific crime occur. He was unable to provide details or explain his motives, suggesting it felt as if the actions were not his own. Furthermore, Dante could not specify whether the sexual assault happened before or after the murder. This detail was crucial because, in Western Australia, sexual assault on a deceased person is not classified as a crime. He claimed his intent was to rape Sophia, but he never meant to kill anyone. Sophia's relatives were shocked by the police's negligence and blamed them for allowing the dangerous criminal to remain free. They pointed out that in 2003, investigators ignored crucial evidence that showed Dante was dangerous. If that evidence had been addressed and he had been held accountable, Sophia would not have encountered him in the restroom that day, and she would still be alive. It was revealed that Dante wasn't even listed among the most dangerous criminals prone. However, this was not Dante's second crime. In 2001, while on vacation with his family, Dante was arrested for sexually assaulting a young girl in another country. However, due to insufficient evidence, he was released, and no information about the incident was shared with the local police. Before Sophia's murder, Dante stalked at least 10 other girls. Later, the public began discussing new disturbing information about the murder of another child. This was the infamous case of 2-year-old James Bulger, brutally murdered on February 12, 1993. His mother had briefly left him unattended behind the door of a butcher's shop in a shopping centre in Liverpool, UK. She didn't intend to stay long as she was just picking up an order, but there was a mix-up, delaying her return. When she came out, her son was missing. She immediately began searching and called the police. James's body was discovered 2 days later. A train had passed over him, but he had died beforehand. A forensic expert identified 42 injuries on James's body, including 10 skull fractures. Because of the numerous injuries, it was impossible to determine which one caused his death. It was later discovered that James had been noticed by 2 9-year-old boys, John Venables and Robert Thompson, who had skipped school that day. They aimlessly wandered around the shopping center, committing several petty thefts. Upon seeing James, they decided to have some fun with him. They forcibly took him away and brutally assaulted him, hitting him with a 10-kilogram iron bar. They kicked, trampled, and threw bricks and stones at him and poured paint on his face. When they saw James was no longer moving, they dragged him to the railroad tracks and left him to die, hoping to disguise the murder as an accident. The crime was quickly solved thanks to CCTV footage from the shopping center, which showed James being taken away, leading to the arrest of John and Robert. They had previously attempted to kidnap another child in a shopping mall, but the mother quickly intervened and saved the child. It was found that after James left the shopping center, they were seen by 38 people along the way. Passers-by observed they forcefully dragging the child. They claimed that James was their younger brother, and they told others they were taking him to the police station because he was lost. No one intervened in the situation. Investigators suspect the crime was not sexual in nature since the child was not wearing underwear, but the examination could not confirm this for certain. Robert Thompson and John Venables denied any sexual abuse of James but were unable to clearly explain why they undressed the child. John and Robert were sentenced to imprisonment for an indefinite period, meaning they would remain in prison until authorities determined they were no longer a threat to society, with a minimum sentence of 10 years. However, due to public pressure, their minimum sentence was increased to 15 years in July 1994. In 1997, the House of Lords overturned this decision, reducing the minimum sentence back to 10 years. Consequently, they served only 8 years in prison and were released in June 2001. By their release, they had completed secondary and advanced level education. While in prison, they suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder, with John frequently experiencing nightmares about James. Importantly, they were given new identities and guaranteed complete anonymity. Any publications revealing their new identities or showing their photographs were officially prohibited. The authorities believed they deserved the second chance at a normal life, and this measure was also taken for their safety, as it was feared that the public might harm them. The public was outraged by the lenient punishment and the protection of their identity. People wanted to know their names and whereabouts to avoid any potential danger. There was skepticism about their ability to reform, which proved justified. On March 2, 2010, John was sent back to prison for storing and distributing explicit photos of children. He received a 2-year sentence and was released in February 2018. Then, he to be charged again. John faced charges for possessing explicit child photos, leading to a 40-month prison sentence. There were reports that he might receive a new identity and undergo plastic surgery at the state's expense to keep his identity hidden, a move James's parents strongly opposed. In July 2019, UK authorities discussed the possibility of relocating him to Canada, Australia, or New Zealand, as maintaining his anonymity in the UK had become too costly. There is almost no information about Robert Thompson. The only known fact is that he was forbidden from communicating with John and was relocated. It is unknown whether he reformed or returned to crime like John. After the murder of Sophia Urrutia, many suspected that Dante, who killed Sophia in a restroom, was actually Robert Thompson with a new identity. He received help with relocation and confidentiality, and many details of their biographies matched. Dante lived in Great Britain for 8 years, coinciding with the time of James's murder. In both cases, the victims were found in a shopping center. It is believed there was a sexual motive, and the victims were of a similar age and appearance. However, this theory could not be confirmed. The police denied any connection. The public suspects the denial was due to confidentiality. Many continue to believe they are the same person and consider him very dangerous. The year after Sophia's murder in March, Dante did not plead guilty to any charges. Consequently, the police reduced the charge from premeditated murder to simple murder, which carries a lighter sentence. Additionally, the sexual assault charge was dropped due to the inability to prove it occurred before Sophia's death. This situation highlights the sometimes absurd nature of the Western Australian legal system. Detectives allegedly obtained a confession from Dante, but none of the interrogations were properly recorded, so they could not be used as evidence. At the trial, due to public pressure, Dante was sentenced to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after 13 years. However, he was able to reduce his time on parole. According to the laws at the time of his conviction, Dante was eligible for early release by 2019, with his case reviewed every 3 years. Each time, there is a chance for him to receive a pardon. The next review of Dante's case occurred in 2022, but it was decided to keep him in prison until at least 2025. The family of Sophia and the public hope that Dante, monster, remains incarcerated for life, seeing him as a danger to others. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Jennifer and Nura Jackson. On the night of June 5, 2005, Jennifer Jackson, 39, was found dead at her home in Memphis, Tennessee, United States. The night before, June 4, Jennifer had attended a friend's wedding and returned home around 11:30 p.m. She lived in a house in a prestigious area of Memphis with her 18-year-old daughter, Nura. Their relationship was so close that they were more like best friends than mother and daughter. Jennifer had previously been married to Nazmi Hassan, a captain in the Lebanese army, and they had a daughter when she was 20. However, their marriage did not last and they divorced shortly after Nura was born. Nura remained with her mother and her father did not visit often due to his work that required frequent travel. As a result, Nura grew up without a father. Jennifer worked hard to provide for herself and her daughter, which strengthened her character. She achieved a lot. Bought a house and a car, and made sure her daughter lacked nothing. When Nura turned 16, her father retired early and moved nearby. They became close during this time. Unfortunately, this close relationship did not last long. Just a year later, her father was murdered in his store. The crime scene provided no clues and the case remains unsolved. After this tragedy, Nura changed a lot. She started skipping school, going to parties frequently, rarely coming home, and relying solely on her mother for financial support. Nura's mother, Jennifer, felt frustrated and did not know how to help her daughter. Although she tried to guide Nura, nothing seemed to work. Friends advised Jennifer to wait out this challenging period, saying that such behavior was common among teenagers and that things would eventually improve. Trusting their advice, Jennifer chose to take a step back. However, tensions within the family remain high due to Noura's defiance until a new horrifying event occurs. At approximately 5 a.m. on June 5, 2005, neighbors heard a loud and persistent knocking on the door. They were still asleep, confused as to who could be visiting at such an early hour and worried that something was wrong. The neighbors lived across the street from Jennifer's house. When they opened the door, they found an 18-year-old girl named Noura screaming, saying that someone had broken into their house. The neighbor then took out a gun for protection and followed Noura to Jennifer's house. They entered through the back door. Noura entered first. She rushed to the phone and called 911. She told the police that someone had attacked her mother. While Noura was talking to 911, she gave the neighbor directions to Jennifer's bedroom. When the neighbor entered the room, he found Jennifer lying on the floor at the foot of the bed, covered in blood. She showed no signs of life, and there was a lot of blood in her mouth and on the bed. He hurried to Jennifer to check her pulse, but she was already cold and there was no way to help her. Realizing she was dead, he went back to tell his wife while Noura was still on the phone with the police. Neighbors later returned to Jennifer's home to support a grieving Noura and keep her company. Paramedics arrived to confirm Jennifer's death, determining that she had been dead for several hours. Forensic experts began examining the crime scene, while police questioned Noura, who may have been the only witness to her mother's attack. Noura said that she came home from the party around 5 in the morning and found someone breaking into the house. Worried about her mother, she quickly ran to Jennifer's bedroom, where she found her unconscious. Noura then ran to a neighbor's house for help, saying that she didn't see anyone in the house. During the investigation of the crime scene, police observed a broken window on the inner door that connects the kitchen to the garage, with shards of glass scattered on the kitchen floor. It appeared that the window had been broken from inside the house rather than outside. All entrance doors were locked with no apparent signs of forced entry. Experts noted that it seemed Jennifer was attacked while sleeping in her bed, leaving her unable to defend herself. The situation appeared staged as a break-in, but there were inconsistencies. The hole in the window was positioned much higher than the door lock, making it impractical for an attacker to reach the door handle and open it. Upon further investigation, the police discovered a second hidden lock near the broken glass, which was easily accessible. This lock, equipped with a concealed hinge on the door frame, could not be seen from outside, indicating that the attacker was familiar with the house. On the kitchen floor, police found bloody boot prints and drops of blood. In the bedroom, blood covered the bed, and Jennifer's body was on the floor, suggesting she was attacked while in bed and then dragged to the floor. The attacker inflicted over 50 wounds on Jennifer's head. There was also a wicker basket present, reminiscent of other crime scenes where criminals cover the victim's face to prevent them from seeing the attacker. The situation seemed suspicious. On the surface, the house appeared affluent, much like the surrounding neighborhood where the victim lived, which could have attracted burglars. However, nothing was stolen. Valuables were clearly visible throughout the house. There was no sign of struggle, and the woman had not been sexually assaulted. So what was the motive? The brutal nature of the attack on Jennifer suggested a personal vendetta. Consequently, police began to investigate her life more closely to identify potential suspects. At the same time, the police searched the area around the house, interviewing neighbors and looking for surveillance cameras that might offer critical evidence. Unfortunately, at that hour, all the nearby residents were still asleep. No one witnessed the attacker or heard anything unusual. Additionally, there were no nearby surveillance cameras to provide any leads. Police learned from Noura that Jennifer had broken up with Mark Irwin shortly before her death. The motive for the murder appeared to be jealousy and resentment, leading police to focus on Mark and bring him in for questioning. During the interview, Mark expressed the pain of the breakup to him, saying that he loved Jennifer and would never hurt her. Mark said that he called Jennifer around midnight to discuss personal matters, hoping to mend their relationship, but she did not answer. Assuming she was asleep, he decided not to bother her and went to bed. Mark mentioned that he stayed at his house that night, which was quite a distance from Jennifer's house, at least an hour-and-a-half drive. Although he lacked a solid alibi, he seemed genuinely distressed and cooperated fully with the investigation, passing a polygraph test. Police also tracked his car and phone, confirming that he did not leave his local area that night. This evidence led to Mark being cleared as a suspect in the murder. Noura said that her mother's second husband, whom Jennifer divorced in 2001, was abusive. He had threatened Jennifer and had once pointed a gun at her mother. Noura suspected that he was involved in her mother's murder. Police investigated this lead but discovered that he had an alibi for the time of the murder. After interviewing Jennifer's relatives, police determined that she had no enemies. Instead, all the evidence pointed to Noura, who had been arguing with her mother recently. Noura may have staged the crime. She may have had a motive to kill her mother to inherit her mother's money. During the investigation, it became clear that Noura was a troubled teenager. She not only had a habit of attending parties but was also frequently smoking marijuana. Noura had a short temper, often displayed aggressive behavior, and would resort to using foul language. She demanded money and, when denied, would resort to physical aggression. Additionally, there was a conflict between Noura and her mother regarding the inheritance from her father. Noura wants to sell the property quickly for cash, while her mother wants to keep it. Police suspect Noura is involved in the crime and have summoned her for questioning. Noura repeated the story she had told earlier. She had attended a party and returned home around 5 in the morning to find her mother brutally murdered. She claimed she had nothing to do with the crime. However, the police soon realized that her story was not entirely accurate. After checking her bank card activity and surveillance camera footage from her car, they discovered that at 4 in the morning, she had stopped at a 24-hour store to buy a first aid kit. The kit was later found in her car, but Noura had not reported it. Forensic experts determined that her mother's time of death was between 1 a.m. and 3 a.m. A review of Noura's phone records showed that she was at her mother's house at the time of the murder, with details that matched the timeline perfectly. In addition, Noura had a small cut on her left hand, which she could not explain. Experts believe the wound may have occurred while she was holding a knife to stab her mother. Noura said she did not tell police about the trip to the store because she did not think it was important. The police interviewed the friends who were with Noura at the party, and they stated that she left early, around midnight, and no one else saw her after that. They also mentioned that there was no beer at the event. Noura had claimed at the party that she had opened drinks and shared increasingly bizarre stories, including singing, spilling beer, getting minor injuries, rescuing a stuck cat, and burning herself while cooking. During the investigation, it was observed that Noura was wearing a warm, long-sleeved sweatshirt that nearly covered her hands, despite it being hot outside. She also had a band-aid on her hand and appeared to have wet hair, suggesting she had just showered. During the interrogation, police asked Noura why her hair was wet and why she was wearing a sweatshirt. Noura insisted she hadn't showered and that she often wore sweatshirts, even in warm weather. However, her friends disagreed, stating that she typically didn't dress that way. The police could not find the murder weapon or any bloody clothes that could link Noura to the crime at the time of the attack. They did discover drops of Jennifer's blood on the porch, indicating that the assailant had left the house with blood on them and had likely disposed of the knife elsewhere. As a result, the Noura Jackson was arrested and charged with Jennifer's murder. Bail was set at $500,000, which Noura could not afford, leaving her in prison awaiting trial, facing the possibility of life imprisonment. During the trial, the prosecution argued that Noura killed her mother due to constant conflicts over Noura's lifestyle, which included partying, skipping school, sex, and drug use. Jennifer refused to give Noura money, which angered her and prompted her to kill her mother to gain access to her assets. Witnesses spoke of a troubled relationship between the two. Jennifer's sister said that tensions had escalated a week before the murder, when Jennifer told Noura that she needed to change her lifestyle or leave the house. A friend who attended the party with Noura claimed that Noura expressed feelings of hatred toward her mother. A cousin shared that Noura asked about inheritance and life insurance, which raised suspicions. A neighbor reported that Noura had angrily demanded money from her mother just a week earlier. Additionally, evidence suggested that there was a dispute regarding the sale of her father's car. The prosecution argued that there had been a staged break-in and that phone records showed Noura was home at the time of the murder. The prosecution presented evidence that Noura had left the party early and spent about 3 hours at home before going to get a first aid kit. While Noura claimed she had been driving around town, phone records showed that she had actually been at home. She claimed that she had left her phone at home, but this was disproved when she called a friend from the store. The friend confirmed that Noura had called him at 1 a.m. on her home phone and hung up immediately. The prosecution argued that she hung up because she was afraid of being discovered after mistakenly calling from her home phone. The prosecutor pointed to inconsistencies in Noura's story, such as the sweatshirt and the cut on her hand. It was determined that she had gone to Walgreens at 4 a.m. to purchase a first aid kit for her cut, which included antiseptic and bandages. Surveillance footage from the store showed Noura asking for tissues at the counter to wipe away the blood, suggesting she had a fresh, bleeding wound. The prosecutor argued that Noura had worn the sweatshirt to cover her cut but was unsuccessful, as police had noticed the bandage on her hand. During the trial, a recording of Noura's 911 call was played. The prosecutor highlighted a peculiar moment. When asked if her mother had been shot, Noura confidently replied no, even though she was in a panic and likely couldn't tell the difference between a gunshot and a stab wound. A neighbor, whom Noura had contacted that morning, testified that he was surprised by how openly she discussed the incident. The neighbor, whom Noura had asked for help that morning, was clearly surprised to hear her talk about the situation. Noura entered her home first, seemingly unafraid, while the neighbor followed her with a gun, worried about a potential attack. This behavior aroused suspicion. The prosecutor alleged that Noura was under the influence of alcohol and illegal drugs and was motivated by a desire to make money to support her partying lifestyle. However, Noura barely spoke during the trial. Her attorney, who took the case pro bono, spoke for her most of the time. The defense argued that there was no direct evidence linking Noura to the crime. No murder weapon was found that contained her DNA or fingerprints, allowing her to be ruled out as a suspect. The lawyer accused the police of handling the investigation poorly. They found no evidence that would help identify the criminal. So the police chose to blame the troubled daughter to close the case. The lawyer argued that statistically, children rarely kill their parents, and this case differs from typical maternal murder cases. The attorney argued that the entire case was based on circumstantial evidence. Jennifer's bedroom did not contain Noura's DNA, and there was no Jennifer's blood on Noura's sweatshirt. The lawyer argued that if Noura had attacked her mother, she would have suffered much more injuries, but she only suffered one cut. The prosecutor denied this claim, saying that Jennifer did not defend herself. Instead, she was asleep at the time of the attack. Despite the defense's arguments against the investigation, the prosecutor's evidence convinced the jury, resulting in Noura Jackson being convicted of second-degree murder. She was sentenced to 20 years and 9 months in prison. After nearly 10 years, the Tennessee Supreme Court granted Noura a new trial. It was revealed that a key witness, a friend of Noura's, came forward, claiming that she had called him to her house to resolve a problem. That night, the witness had also used drugs, which may have affected his judgment, and the prosecutor was charged with withholding this information during the trial. On August 22, 2014, the Supreme Court overturned Noura's conviction, stating that this testimony was crucial to the jury's decision and that they might have ruled differently if they had known the truth. Concerns were raised about the integrity of the prosecutor, Amy Wyrick, as it became evident she had engaged in similar misconduct in other cases by concealing important facts to secure convictions. The court reprimanded her for these actions. In response, Amy stated she was prepared to retry the case and demonstrate Noura's guilt. Noura's excitement about her new trial was significantly dampened. She had new lawyers who supported her and successfully moved her case to a neighboring district court to minimize publicity and avoid involvement from prosecutor Amy. Despite this, Noura was still very anxious about the possibility of facing trial again. Ultimately, she was offered a plea bargain for a lighter sentence, which she accepted. She used a legal option called an Alford plea, where she maintained her innocence but pleaded guilty because the prosecution had enough evidence to convict her. As a result, her sentence was reduced to 15 years, and she was released early for good behavior in 2016, having served a total of 11 years in prison. During her time in prison, she experienced a worsening of a medical condition that prevents her from having children, and her criminal record makes it impossible for her to adopt. Hello, crime enthusiasts, are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Corey Richins. The death of a loved one is a devastating tragedy that deeply impacts family members and children. Each person handles the loss in their own way, trying to deal with the blow of fate. To cope with this shock, Corey Richins, a woman, wrote an entire book. It seemed that she, more than anyone else, understood the depth of what happened. However, as the police delved deeper into the tragic death of a man from Utah, it became increasingly clear that there was more cynicism. Eric Richins was born in 1982 as the eldest of 3 children, with 2 younger sisters, Katie and Amy. He shared a special bond with Katie. The family lived in Summit County, Utah, where they were well known and wealthy, thanks to their cattle ranch. Many buildings in the town still bear the family's last name. Despite their prominence, the Eric were humble and kind, and they were respected by everyone who knew them. Eric grew up on his parents' farm, where he participated in sports and helped with chores. His family was part of the Mormon Church, and religion played a major role in Eric's life. He spent 2 years on a mission trip to Mexico City, where he demonstrated good character by helping the community. Upon his return, Eric attended the University of Utah, where he earned a bachelor's degree in international law. During this period, Eric began dating Julia Jurgensen. They married when Eric was just 20 years old. However, due to their youth and desire for independence, they couldn't maintain the marriage and decided to divorce. After his studies and the failed marriage, Eric saw promising opportunities to start a construction business, which he began to pursue. Eric frequently visited the Home Depot store, where he enjoyed chatting with the cashiers while waiting for his order. During his visits, he noticed a charming cashier named Corey, who was widely considered one of the most beautiful women in town. Eric was captivated by her beauty and secretly in love with her. But he hesitated to ask her out because he was still dealing with the emotional and financial fallout from his difficult divorce. Eric's celibacy continued for a while, but eventually, he asked Corey out, and she agreed. Their first date was filled with laughter and fun. They got along well, and their relationship developed quickly. The couple was truly happy despite their significant difference in social status. Eric was always cheerful and sociable, able to cheer her up on Corey's worst days. Despite the shock from his first marriage, Eric quickly realized that Corey was the one for him and soon proposed. She accepted, and after a whirlwind romance, they got married in 2013. Curry was not only beautiful but also intelligent. She attended her chosen university and earned a bachelor's degree in health management, followed by a master's degree. Curry had previously worked as an administrator at a design agency before meeting Eric in a hardware store. Curry became a new ray of light and hope for him, giving him confidence that he could build a loving family. Curry was born in 1990 in an ordinary family. Curry has an older brother and an older sister. Her father died at the age of 57 in 2010 after struggling with alcoholism. He was unable to witness Curry's wedding, which took place 3 years after his death. Before the wedding, Eric's mother insisted on a prenuptial agreement to protect her son from experiencing another shock like his previous divorce. At that time, Eric's business share was worth about $2.5 million. His mother presented the agreement as a precaution in case of divorce. According to the prenup, Curry could not claim Eric's money, and he could not claim hers. Eric arranged for Curry and partner Cody to be the beneficiaries on his life insurance policy. In the event of his death, Cody could use his portion of the insurance payout to buy out Eric's share of their business. After their wedding, Eric and Curry began their ideal life together. They bought their home, lived happily, and hoped to have children. Inspired by her successful brother who had made a fortune buying, renovating, and selling houses, Curry decided to follow the same path. With Eric's experience in the construction industry, Curry obtained her real estate broker's license and began selling real estate. Her friendly nature and attractive appearance quickly made her a well-known real estate broker in town, which made Eric proud. Eventually, Curry shared her brother's business model with Eric and they began working together. Curry identified profitable properties for resale, Eric managed the renovations, and they sold the homes. Their business flourished until a couple sued Curry for failing to disclose the true condition of a home. The lawsuit was settled out of court and did not affect their business. After 9 years of marriage, they have 3 sons, Weston, Carter, and Ashton. Despite his busy work schedule, Eric values family time, being actively involved in his sons' lives and supporting them in sports. Since 2020, things have been unusual in their relationship. While on vacation in Greece, Eric called younger sister Amy and said Curry had given him a drink that made him feel sick. He suspected she was trying to poison him and warned that if he suddenly died, Curry would be responsible. Although the family was concerned, they dismissed Eric's claims as paranoid because the couple seemed happy. After the vacation, Eric secretly changed his will in November 2020, leaving his business shares and assets to younger sister Katie without telling Curry. The couple continued to live together for another 1.5 years until early 2022. This time, the conflict was over Curry's desire to buy an unfinished mansion for $2 million, which she thought could be sold for $5 million after renovations. Eric is skeptical about the deal's profitability, causing tension between them. Curry accuses Eric of controlling her business, while he believes the investment is too risky. Around this time, Cody, Eric's business partner, was notified by the insurance company that Curry had tried to change the beneficiary on Eric's life insurance policy to her name. Although she was unsuccessful, this raised serious concerns about her intentions. Eric started considering divorce, knowing that Curry would lose everything due to their marriage contract. Eric had already transferred his share to younger sister and removed Curry's name from all documents, including the insurance policy. Meanwhile, Curry spent $1,000 on powerful and dangerous painkillers. On Valentine's Day 2022, Eric told Cody that after eating a sandwich Curry made, he suffered severe respiratory irritation, similar to an earlier incident in Greece. Despite his suspicions, Eric did not leave Curry's side or stop eating her food. Eric continued to be suspicious of Curry, especially after he refused to buy the mansion. On the night of March 4th, Eric, 39, was found dead in his bed. The night before, Curry had made Eric a Moscow Mule over dinner. After he finished drinking it, they went to bed. During the night, Curry woke up to comfort one of their sons, who had been having a nightmare. When she returned to the bedroom around 3 a.m., she found Eric cold and unresponsive. She called 911, saying that Eric had no signs of life and that her attempts to resuscitate him had failed. Paramedics confirmed Eric's death, and Curry mentioned that she had attempted CPR on him, but doctors doubted her story. The man was bleeding from his mouth, but his wife had no blood on her. His death appeared to be due to a drug overdose, as tests showed his blood levels were 5 times higher than the lethal dose. When Curry was asked why he was taking such a strong drug, she said she didn't know. Eric's family denied that he had any health problems that would warrant such medication. A review of his medical history revealed that he had not seen a doctor in a long time and that no one had prescribed him this hard-to-get prescription drug. Eric had no history of drug addiction or convictions and was otherwise healthy. Just one day after Eric's death, a dispute broke out between Curry and Katie. Curry discovers that all of her husband's businesses and assets are legally Katie's, leaving Curry with nothing. This revelation caused Curry to become aggressive, and she attacked Katie, leading to the police being called. Unwilling to back down, Curry filed a lawsuit, claiming that the prenuptial agreement had been violated. She argued that her name could not be removed from the will and insurance policy without her consent. Curry asked for her rightful share and $300,000 in attorney's fees. In response, Katie took legal action against Curry, suspecting foul play in her brother's death and accusing Curry of poisoning her brother for financial gain. Police began investigating Eric's death and suspected it was not an accident. Curry was the prime suspect. During the investigation, police requested access to Curry's cell phone. They discovered that messages with Neil, the salesman, had been deleted, but police were able to recover them. Curry said her husband's death was a huge loss for her, and was especially difficult for Eric's 3 sons, as he was very important to them. Curry played the role of a grieving, mourning widow to avoid suspicion. Police continued working on the case and found another inconsistency in Curry's testimony. According to her story, she went to her son's room at night without her phone, leaving it charging on the nightstand beside her bed. However, records showed that she was actively using the phone at that time, messaging various people. It was even determined that the phone was in motion, indicating she was walking around the house with it. This information did not match her story. The police questioned Neil, the person who sold the medicine and supplied her with the medicine. He confessed everything. He revealed that she had been experimenting with different drugs, claiming that none of them helped with her severe back pain. Little did Neil know that the drugs had an entirely different purpose. In exchange for testifying against Curry, Neil was not charged. During the investigation, it was discovered that Curry had repeatedly taken out life insurance policies on her husband. Immediately after his death, she contacted the insurance company and received $100,000. The day after her husband died, she hired a locksmith to open his safe and took about $150,000 from it. With Eric gone, there was no one to fund Curry projects, and she was also burdened with significant debts at the time of his death. She owed $190,000 in taxes, $1,847,000 to creditors for a mansion purchase, and another $514,000. Curry then wrote a book called You're With Me with her sons. She wanted a book to help her children cope with the loss of a loved one. So she decided to write it herself. After the book was completed, Curry began appearing on various shows to talk about her book. She said that the death of her husband, Eric, was a shock, and she dedicated the book to him and her children. Sales of the book skyrocketed, becoming widely popular within a few weeks. Many mothers bought it to help their children cope with the loss of a loved one. The book's plot was particularly intriguing. In the story, the husband dies from a brain aneurysm. For the Curry, it was a means to secure financial stability since she was in financial ruin. In the book, Curry seems to imply that she did something to her husband, which seems suspicious. Despite everything, Curry profited from her husband's death, benefiting from insurance payouts and earnings from selling a book. She exploited her children's grief for monetary gain. There were also suspicions that Curry might have killed her husband. Rumors suggested that Curry had an affair during her marriage and wanted to be with this man without losing the affluent lifestyle her husband Eric provided. Divorce would have been financially disadvantageous for Curry, so she allegedly killed her husband to get his money. Another motive was Eric's refusal to finance the purchase of a house. 6 months after her husband Eric died, Curry's family noticed that she was preparing a Pinterest folder with wedding ideas. This confused everyone, since all of her friends and relatives were married and no one was planning a wedding, leading to speculation that Curry might be preparing for her wedding to her lover. On May 8, 2023, 2 months after actively promoting her book, 33-year-old Curry Richens was arrested on charges of first-degree murder with aggravated circumstances. She was also charged with possession of a large amount of a controlled substance. The investigation into her husband Eric's death on May 4, 2022, lasted more than a year. Curry is currently being held without bail pending trial. Curry's neighbors and many family members were shocked and could not believe that she had caused her husband's death. Curry Richens gave numerous interviews, presenting herself as a grieving widow who, even a year after her husband's death, had not yet come to terms with the loss. This strategy helped her gain sympathy from television viewers. The interview was broadcast nationwide, causing a significant public response. Curry received significant support and increased sales of her book. She attempted to defend herself by blaming her late husband for past problems with illegal substances, but this claim has never been verified. The couple's 3 children now live with Eric's family, and temporary custody is with Eric's younger sister, Katie. Curry's book could ultimately be crucial for prosecutors in painting Eric Richens' death as a calculated murder with an elaborate cover-up. The judge has scheduled a pre-trial conference for September 23 for the prosecution and defense to discuss jury selection. A trial date has not yet been set. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Tiffany Crawford. At 11 p.m. on May 2, 2017, 37-year-old Jason Crawford called 911. He reported that he was outside his home and that his wife, Tiffany, appeared lifeless in the car. When the ambulance arrived, they found a woman sitting in the driver's seat of her SUV. She slumped over and unresponsive. As they opened the door and checked for a pulse, a pink pistol fell to the floor of the car. Unfortunately, the woman could not be saved. The police discovered she had 2 gunshot wounds to her head, one on the left side of her jaw and another in her temple. Jason explained that he was at home during the incident. After an argument with his wife, Tiffany, he had forced her to leave the house. As she left, she told him she loved him. Shortly afterward, he heard a gunshot, her scream, and then another gunshot. He rushed outside, saw the tragic scene, and called for help. A police officer believed she ended her own life. But other officers had doubts and many questions. Tiffany was a very positive person and loved children very much. At the time of her death, she had 2 children, a son who was 5 years old and a daughter who was 4. She was a teacher and worked in that profession before having her children. At one point, she raised her children herself and understands the difficulties single mothers face. This led her to create a social media group called Mothers Helping Mothers. The group quickly gained popularity, amassing over 9,000 members who actively supported one another. The organization has become a place where people share experiences and receive support during difficult times. Tiffany had been married for over 6 years, and it was her second marriage. Her first marriage did not go well. Her second husband, Jason, had also been divorced for several years before they married. When Tiffany met Jason, she and her first husband were separated and in the process of divorcing. Tiffany and Jason began dating after her divorce was finalized. She was known for being cheerful and sociable. Those who knew her could not believe that she could end her own life. But she doesn't have any enemies either. After Tiffany's death, the police discovered that Jason was the son of a manager in the sheriff's department. Rhonda Crawford, his mother, informed Tiffany's mother about the incident. Due to Jason's connections to the police, the investigation was conducted very carefully to avoid a conflict of interest. Police suspect a violent death has occurred, so they need to thoroughly inspect the car where Tiffany was found. Consequently, the car was confiscated and inspected, and the area around it was scrutinized, but they didn't find any clues. An autopsy was needed to determine if Tiffany could have shot herself twice. The police continued their work at the scene after the medics departed. However, by morning, the sheriff decided to transfer the case to the Alabama Bureau of Investigation due to the conflict of interest. The new investigators needed to reconstruct the incident from the beginning and EED the SUV to find evidence. A warrant was obtained to search the vehicle, but when an officer went to the sheriff's office, they found out that the car had already been returned to Tiffany's family and Jason was using it. When an officer arrived at Jason's house, he found that the SUV had been thoroughly cleaned, and the interior was shining. Although less than 24 hours had passed since Tiffany's death, important evidence was lost. However, the lab was able to examine the car and take several photographs. For unknown reasons, the vehicle was returned to Jason, as if the possibility of murder was not considered. Despite these suspicious circumstances, the officers were interested in the conversation that occurred between him and Tiffany on that tragic night. Jason mentioned that Tiffany has become very distant from him in recent months. He noticed changes in her behavior, which he attributed to alcohol. According to Jason, she was consuming 2 or 3 bottles of strong alcohol each week and was involved with a support group for mothers. Meanwhile, their marriage was falling apart. At the same time, experts are analyzing the bullet's flight path and studying the possibility that Tiffany shot herself twice. The first shot struck the left side of her chin, and the second hit her left temple, with the weapon falling from her left hand. However, Tiffany was right-handed. It is very uncommon for police to encounter cases where a victim inflicts fatal injuries on themselves, especially using their non-dominant hand. This was the first time they had seen such a scenario. All the circumstances were very confusing, which made the investigation take a long time. Police accessed Jason and Tiffany's social media and computers. Then, they found several important messages. Just a few hours before the incident, Jason discovered Tiffany's messages with another man on the computer. This may make him angry, and maybe he killed her, making him a suspect. Then, Jason admitted he knew about the messages and was angry, leading to an argument. He met his wife at the door and refused to let her in. Their conversation lasted about an hour, during which she asked to collect her clothes. Jason slammed the door and went to gather her belongings. According to Jason, moments later, he heard a gunshot, a scream, and then another gunshot. After interviewing Tiffany's relatives and friends, the police discovered that her mother and friends knew about her extramarital affair. It was revealed that she intended to leave Jason because they often quarrel and have conflicts. They had been facing issues for a while, and it seemed that a divorce was imminent. Tiffany found a job at a grocery store, which allowed her to be financially independent and not dependent on her husband. She did not want her husband to find out about her new relationship to avoid hurting him. Long before the incident, she communicated with her mother over the phone, clarifying that she and the other man were just talking and nothing more. She planned to have a serious discussion with her husband, Jason, to talk over all the details of the divorce. Most of Tiffany's relatives and friends do not believe that she ending her own life. They knew that she would not be able to leave her young children behind. However, Jason already knew what had happened, and it involved he. Detectives listened back to the recording of Jason's call to 911, which he made after discovering Tiffany's body. The police noted that he was extremely calm, which was unusual given the circumstances. He didn't seem worried at all. Moreover, when the dispatcher repeatedly asked who had shot she, he didn't answer any of the questions. Was his silence due to remorse, as if he were the killer? A week after Tiffany's death, the results of the forensic examination were still pending. Nevertheless, the detective decided to question Jason. The officer inquired about the incidents of that evening, revealing new details that Jason had not previously mentioned. The detective suggested a lie detector test, which Jason agreed to take. During the test, he was asked directly if he had shot his wife. He denied shooting her, ended the interrogation, and left. The police did not detain him, but the lie detector test was automatically considered a failure. The forensic examination took longer than expected because of some contentious issues, and there wasn't enough evidence to charge Jason. However, there was enough reason to classify the case as a murder. No one believed that Tiffany had ending her own life. It took nearly a year for Jason to face a jury. For the relatives and friends of the Crawfords, this period was extremely difficult. No one could have imagined that Tiffany would ending her own life, especially twice. However, Jason was such a wonderful person that it seemed impossible to suspect him of such a cold-blooded murder. During the year-long investigation, Tiffany's relatives continued to communicate and maintain relations with the Crawfords. Nevertheless, investigators had a different perspective, as the autopsy confirmed that Tiffany was murdered. The first wound paralyzed her, so it was impossible for her to fire a second shot. It appeared that the second shot was meant to finish her off. Jason was arrested on May 21, 2018, but was in custody for only half an hour, then, he being released on a $100,000 bail. Law enforcement officials noted that he appeared unworried, remaining confident and calm. The defense argued that no traces of gunfire or blood were found on Jason's clothes. However, the police did not conduct these tests because they initially believed Tiffany had ending her own life. The house was not searched. If searched, it might have revealed Jason's involvement in the case. Their eldest son hesitantly said he heard his father, Jason, enter the house before the first shot was fired. The prosecution argued for Jason's guilt, pointing to a failed lie detector test. However, the defense countered that lie detector tests are not 100% accurate and have a significant margin of error. Forensic experts and police remain convinced that he is guilty. His calm demeanor during the call to 911 was noted, but could not be considered evidence. He explained that he was in shock due to the traumatic sight, which was why he was calm. People react differently in such situations. Forensic experts have good reason to suspect Jason, a gunshot wound on the left side of Tiffany's head. There were no gunpowder particles or abrasions around the wound, which typically occur from the shock wave when a gun is fired at close range. These traces vanish at distances over 25 centimeters, making it nearly impossible for her to inflict the wound on herself without assistance, especially in the confined space of a car. Moreover, the trigger was pulled with the left hand while the car door was closed. Even if she had turned around in the car, there wouldn't have been enough space for such a movement. When detectives arrived at the scene that night, the driver's side door was closed. There was no blood or gunpowder on the glass, suggesting the door was open during the shooting. These inconsistencies imply that the killer was nearby when the incident occurred. The killer likely shot Tiffany with the door open, placed the gun in her hand, closed the car door, and the gun then fell from her hand. Despite this evidences, Tiffany's mother continued to support Jason. In an interview, she expressed that she still trusts him, emphasizing that he is a decent man. The first trial ended without a verdict because the jury could not agree on Jason's guilt. The reason is the lack of evidence such as fingerprints, DNA, or security camera footage. More than 4 years have passed since that tragic night. In the second trial, which included a new independent forensic expert, the expert supported the theory that Tiffany ending her own life. In November 2022, Jason appeared in court again, he facing charges of first-degree murder. He still had the support of Tiffany's mother, although she did not want to attend court to hear accusations she believed were false. Despite her reluctance, she was compelled to testify as the prosecution's first witness. The prosecution highlighted Jason's history of being wronged, noting that his first wife had cheated on him, severely damaging his honor, and that his second wife, Tiffany, was also in contact with another man. Police discovered a recording of a call Jason made the evening before the murder, indicating he was extremely upset. However, Jason claimed he did not remember this conversation. He also continued to have a friendly relationship with his first wife. Experts collected DNA to test the gun. They found a man's fingerprints on the gun. However, the fingerprints were too minimal to identify anyone, which raised further questions. It appeared the weapon had been wiped clean before it ended up in Tiffany's hand. The prosecutor stated that the main motive for the murder was anger over Tiffany's extramarital affair. The prosecution argued that the weapon was 25 centimeters from her head. However, an independent forensic expert countered these arguments. He explained that Tiffany's thick hair could have absorbed the impact and dispersed traces of gunpowder and blood. Therefore, the weapon might have been closer but didn't leave any clear traces. Friends provided key information, confirming that Tiffany had been drinking heavily. It was also revealed that she was seen as a psychologist before these incidents to address emotional issues. After 4 days, the case went to the grand jury. They deliberated for over 2 hours and then asked to see the recording of Jason's conversation with the 911 dispatcher. The jury noted that when Jason was asked where the pistol was, he said it was lying next to Tiffany, but the pistol was actually in his hand when the police and medics arrived. Based on this inconsistency, the jury returned a guilty verdict. Although Jason claimed he might have misspoken, but Tiffany's mother turned away from her once beloved son-in-law. Jason Crawford received a 99-year prison sentence but will be eligible for parole after 15 years. His expected release date is November 16, 2121, but he can apply for parole in 2038. Jason plans to appeal the verdict. The children of he and Tiffany currently live with Jason's parents.